If you were to ask 100 Fortune 500 CEOs or like 100 Silicon Valley founders what the ultimate shortcut to making millions of dollars is, you would probably hear a lot of the same buzzwords.
Oh, absolutely. You'd hear all about, leveraging artificial intelligence or building these complex sales funnels.
Right? Or optimizing supply chains, maybe some aggressive venture capital strategy.
Mhm.
But I guarantee you, not a single one of them is going to look you in the eye and say that the absolute prerequisite to mastering the art of business is to wake up, eat a single banana, and
Well,
go for a run.
yeah, I mean, it sounds completely disconnected from the reality of modern commerce, doesn't it?
Totally.
We are so conditioned to look for complex, highly technical solutions to business problems. So the idea that the foundation of a sharp, resilient, and highly profitable entrepreneurial mind begins with just basic, almost primitive physical movement, well, it feels entirely out of place in a business discussion.
And yet, that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking the very first chapter, really the foundational lesson of this truly legendary, almost mythical text in the direct response marketing world. I'm talking about the Boron Letters.
Right, written by the great Gary Halbert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who is widely considered, one of the greatest, most ruthless, and most successful copywriters to ever live. But here is the massive catch. He didn't write these letters from some corner office in Manhattan.
No, he did
He
not.
wrote them in 1984 from a bunk in the Boron Federal Prison Camp, directing them to his youngest son, Bond.
Which is just a wild premise for a marketing book.
It really is. So today we are going to explore why a mastermind of human psychology believed that physical momentum is the non-negotiable prerequisite for wealth, and how a remarkably simple shift in how you process your own sloppy, disastrous first attempts at anything will instantly put you ahead of like 95% of your competition.
I think we should establish the pedagogical baseline right now, just because, well, the listener needs to understand the gravity of this text.
Yeah, set the stage for us.
What we are exploring today is absolutely not a generic fitness lecture. Halbert was not a health guru.
Right, not at all.
He was a man who made millions upon millions of dollars by deeply understanding human desires, fears, and psychology.
Exactly.
So when a master of behavioral economics and sales starts his ultimate 46-year distillation of life and business secrets with a hyper-specific lesson on physical biology, we need to, strip away our assumptions.
We really do. We have to analyze the underlying mechanism of why he's doing that.
Precisely. He is laying the concrete foundation for the mental architecture you need to survive in highly competitive markets.
I want to push on that context a bit, actually, because the setting is just so jarring to me. It's June 12, 1984. Gary Halbert is sitting in this federal prison camp, and it happens to be his 46th birthday.
Quite a place to spend a birthday.
Right. He is surrounded by this bizarre mix of society. I'm talking bank robbers, hitmen, drug dealers, alongside, white-collar felons. And he decides to write a series of letters to his son, promising to impart every single life and business secret he has accumulated.
Yeah, he even states in this first letter that he plans to use these letters as the rough draft for a book.
Oh, yeah, a book he hilariously and, let's be honest, arrogantly plans the title, How to Be Your Own Messiah.
Which is such a Gary Halbert title.
It really is. And you hear a title like that coming from a millionaire copywriter, and you brace yourself for some cutthroat, Wall Street-level corporate warfare tactics.
And that expectation is entirely justified. I mean, when you hear How to Be Your Own Messiah, you expect a treatise on manipulation or advanced negotiation frameworks.
Or like the mathematical breakdown of direct mail conversion rates.
Exactly. You expect the dark arts of copywriting.
Right. But his very first lesson, the absolute first thing he feels compelled to drill into his young son's head is what he refers to as road work.
Road work.
Yeah. He dictates this routine, walking, jogging, or running for exactly 1 hour a day, 6 days a week.
And he isn't just suggesting general activity either.
No, he lays out an incredibly rigid, specific groove, as he calls it. You get out of bed early, you wash up, you eat exactly one piece of fruit.
Specifically a banana, he strongly emphasizes that.
Yes, a banana is the best option, and then you immediately hit the street. Half an hour out, half an hour back. I have to admit, when I first read this, I felt almost let down.
Really? Why is that?
Well, we're talking about high-level business mastery, and the big secret is a morning jog. It feels like something a high school track coach would say, not a marketing genius.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking about high-level business strategy, and the secret is a morning jog.
I completely understand the initial disappointment, but that reaction really stems from our cultural separation of the mind and the body.
How do you mean?
Well, we tend to view business as an entirely cerebral pursuit, right? Something that happens on a laptop or in a boardroom, completely divorced from the biological vessel performing the work.
Oh, I see. Like we're just floating brains.
Exactly. What Halbert is doing here is forcing a reconciliation between the biological hardware and the cognitive software.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the underlying motivation for this specific routine is twofold. The first layer is deeply personal and existential, which we actually learn from his son Bond's later commentary on these letters.
Right, because Bond published these letters later with his own notes.
Yes, and Bond points out that Gary's own father had died of heart failure at the age of 59.
Wow, that's young.
It is, and that premature death really haunted Gary. He had spent the first half of his own life totally abusing his biology-heavy drinking, junk food, immense stress.
So prison was almost a detox for him.
Ironically, yes. Being incarcerated at Boron forced him into an environment where he was entering the healthiest, most regulated period of his adult life.
Okay, so is this just a man in his mid-40s having a mortality crisis? Because, I mean, if he's just projecting his fear of an early heart attack onto his son, that doesn't necessarily translate into a universal business strategy for you, the listener.
That's a fair challenge. The fear of mortality was the catalyst, certainly. But the business application, the real reason this is chapter 1 of a marketing masterclass, is built on a singular, unshakable maxim that Gary discovered through brutal trial and error.
And what is that?
The maxim is, how you feel affects how you think.
I want to pause right there. How you feel affects how you think. I mean, it sounds like a bumper sticker, but if you actually pull it apart, it has massive implications for how we structure our workdays.
It dictates everything. Let's look at the mechanics of knowledge work, which is what copywriting and entrepreneurship are. You are attempting to generate ideas, solve complex problems, and, persuade human beings through text or speech.
Right, you're using your brain as your primary tool.
Exactly. And you cannot produce brilliant multi-million-dollar ideas if your brain is clouded by lethargy or metabolic waste or just a poor physical state.
Yeah, that brain fog is a killer.
Gary understood that writers and entrepreneurs are incredibly susceptible to mood. If you wake up feeling sluggish, your writing will be sluggish. Your decision-making will be compromised.
So he was trying to hack his mood.
He realized that to give himself the best possible statistical chance of being in a highly productive, aggressive, and creative mood for deep work, he had to engineer that mood biologically.
That's fascinating.
Even during his heavy drinking days prior to prison, Gary knew that before he could sit down and write a record-breaking sales letter, he had to take his body in like a car to a mechanic.
Like a tune-up before a big race.
Exactly. He had to eat clean, hydrate, and physically prepare his biology to handle the intense mental exertion of writing.
Okay, the car mechanic analogy is interesting because he's very specific about the fuel. He insists on this incredibly light breakfast, just a banana.
Yes, not a big meal.
Right, not a bowl of oatmeal, not eggs and bacon, not a heavy carb-loaded meal that society traditionally calls the most important meal of the day. And his reasoning in the text is that people actually work much better when they are slightly hungry.
And biologically, he is entirely correct, even if he didn't have the modern neuroscience vocabulary to explain it back in 1984.
What's the science behind it?
Well, when you consume a heavy meal, your body shifts into a parasympathetic state, which is commonly known as rest and digest.
Oh, right. The food coma.
Precisely. A massive amount of blood flow and energy is diverted away from your brain and skeletal muscles and directed toward your gastrointestinal tract to process that food. This is why you feel that massive cognitive dip, that brain fog, after a large lunch.
You sit at your desk staring at a spreadsheet and your brain is just offline because your stomach is monopolizing all the energy.
Exactly. Wait, let me rephrase that. It's not just about energy monopoly. It's also about evolutionary drive.
Evolutionary drive, like survival instincts.
Yes. From an evolutionary standpoint, a satiated animal is a lazy animal. If a lion has just eaten gazelle, it sleeps in the sun. It doesn't go hunting for a second gazelle.
That makes sense. It doesn't need to.
Right. Hunger is a biological signal that drives alertness, vigilance, and problem solving. It heightens your senses because your body is telling your brain, hey, you need to secure resources.
So by eating just a single banana, Gary is giving himself just enough energy without turning off that hunger drive.
Exactly. He is providing just enough immediate glucose and potassium to fuel the physical movement of the roadwork without triggering that heavy rest and digest shutdown.
The engine is turning, but the hunger remains.
Keeping the mind razor sharp and aggressive for the business day ahead.
That makes a lot of sense. The banana is just kindling to start the fire, not the whole log. And it mirrors how we treat our technology, honestly. Think about what happens when you leave your laptop running for 2 weeks straight.
Oh, it becomes a nightmare.
Right. You have 60 tabs open in your browser, you have background applications draining the processor, and the whole operating system becomes agonizingly sluggish. The cursor stutters. Programs crash. When you call tech support, what is the very first thing they tell you to do?
They tell you to reboot the machine.
You reboot to clear the RAM. You flush out all the fragmented data that's clogging up the processing power.
That's a perfect analogy.
Doing this road work first thing in the morning is the biological equivalent of clearing your RAM before you attempt to run a massive, heavy software program, which in your case is building your business, writing your code, or managing your team.
That's exactly it.
Gary states explicitly in the letter that this morning routine cleans you out, it settles you down, and it gives you a nice glow that will stay with you throughout the day. He's essentially saying that this 1 hour of physical movement dictates the operational quality of your cognitive processing for the remaining 23 hours.
And the mechanism behind that glow he mentions is fascinating when you look at sleep physiology.
Oh, how so?
Well, when we sleep, we accumulate sleep inertia. During the night, the brain is actually actively flushing out metabolic waste through the lymphatic system. But when you wake up, you often have residual adenosine and cortisol lingering in your system.
That's that groggy, clouded feeling we all hate.
Right. Physical movement, specifically walking or jogging, increases your heart rate and blood flow, which acts as a literal physiological flush.
So you're pumping the bad stuff out.
It forces oxygenated blood into the brain, clearing out the chemical remnants of sleep. You are wiping the slate clean of yesterday's stress and last night's inertia. You are forcefully prioritizing the biological hardware so that the mental software has a clean, optimized environment to run in.
So if we pull a practical takeaway for the listener right now, it's this. Before you spend another minute obsessing over how to optimize your business, before you tweak your marketing funnel, before you read another book on leadership or stress over your website design, you have to optimize your morning physical groove.
Absolutely. It has to come first.
You need to start tomorrow. Wash your face, which is a literal thermal shock to wake up the nervous system, eat a piece of light fruit, and get moving. Half an hour out, half an hour back. Because if your biological hardware is sluggish, all the brilliant business software you try to run on it will just crash.
It is a phenomenal baseline to establish, but we also have to acknowledge the reality of human behavior here.
Which is?
Stating that you should wake up early and run for an hour a day is very easy. Writing it in a letter to your son is easy.
Oh, for sure. Talk is cheap.
Actually putting on your shoes and doing it, especially when your body isn't adapted to it, is utterly miserable. The initial physical friction is immense.
Your lungs burn, your shins ache, your ego complains.
Exactly.
Which brings up the obvious problem. If it hurts, and you are a busy person who already has a stressful business to run, how on earth do you sustain it?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do you force yourself out the front door on day 4? When it's raining, your legs feel like lead, and your brain is actively fabricating a dozen entirely logical excuses for why you should stay in bed and just start working.
This is where Gary pivots from a physical routine into a deeply biological trick for making hard work not just tolerable, but inevitable.
A biological trick.
Yes.
Yeah.
He introduces a concept that carries a very heavy warning. He tells his son, Bond, that if he sticks to this roadwork habit, it will eventually become a literal, honest-to-God drug addiction.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
He explains that after a specific duration of sustained physical exertion, he pinpoints it at about 40 minutes of road work, the brain crosses a threshold and begins to secrete what he calls survival chemicals.
Yes, he specifically names them in the letter. Beta endorphins and norepinephrine.
Right. And to frame this, Gary draws a very crucial, definitive line between what he calls negative addictions and positive addictions.
What's the difference in his mind?
He uses smoking cigarettes as his primary example of a negative addiction. A negative addiction is a dependency on a substance or behavior that fundamentally lowers your quality of life.
It degrades your biological hardware over time.
Exactly. It drains your finances and compromises your health. A positive addiction, on the other hand, is a dependency on a behavior that actively and continuously improves the quality of your life, your health, and your cognitive output.
I really struggle with his use of the word addiction here. I want to push back on this because addiction is not a light word.
No, it's not.
It almost universally carries a terrible, destructive connotation. It conjures up images of a total loss of agency, chemical dependency, withdrawal, and the destruction of relationships.
It's a very loaded term.
And we have to remember the context here.
Here.
This is coming from a man sitting in a federal prison, a man who openly admits in these very letters that he had a history of heavy substance abuse and destructive drinking.
Which adds a lot of weight to him using that word.
Right. For him to use the word addiction to describe a morning jog feels almost reckless. I mean, is positive addiction actually a scientifically valid concept, or is he just using extreme hyperbole to motivate his kid?
It's a highly perceptive challenge, especially given Gary's personal history with substance abuse. The terminology feels abrasive because we associate addiction strictly with pathology.
Exactly. Sickness.
However, from a neurological standpoint, he is isolating the exact same dopamine and reward pathways that govern destructive addictions, but he is hijacking them for an anabolic, constructive purpose.
So he's intentionally trying to get hooked.
Yes. And Gary was likely influenced by a psychiatrist named William Glasser, who actually published a book in 1976 titled Positive Addiction.
Oh, so it was a known concept at the time.
It was. Glasser studied runners and meditators and found that they exhibited the exact same psychological markers of withdrawal-like irritability, anxiety, restlessness if they were deprived of their daily routine.
Wow.
So Gary wasn't using hyperbole at all. He was offering a literal biological diagnosis.
So he's saying you can literally brainwash your own neurochemistry to crave the hard work.
Precisely. Let me expand on that mechanism because it's vital for the listener to understand why this works.
Please do.
Let's look at the chemicals Gary mentions. Beta endorphins are endogenous opioids.
Which means they are produced naturally in the body, right?
Correct. And they bind to the exact same receptors in your brain as morphine or heroin.
That is wild.
Gary claims in the letter that they are 200 times stronger than morphine. While the exact multiplier might be a bit of 1980s colloquial exaggeration, the underlying science is totally sound. They are profoundly powerful pain-suppressing neurotransmitters.
So they act like a natural painkiller for the physical stress of the run.
Exactly. But unlike synthetic drugs that create a numbing artificial high and a subsequent crash, these endogenous chemicals create a natural, zestful, lucid high.
Okay, and what about the norepinephrine? Endorphins handle the pain, but what does the norepinephrine do in this context?
Norepinephrine is essentially adrenaline for the brain. It is the neurotransmitter responsible for vigilance, focus, and cognitive alertness. It narrows your attention and sharpens your reaction time.
So you're getting a painkiller and a focus enhancer at the same time.
When you combine the pain-killing euphoria of beta endorphins with the laser-sharp cognitive focus of norepinephrine, you get a state of flow that feels incredible. You feel intensely alive, clear-headed, and energized, rather than speedy or out of control like you would on a synthetic stimulant.
It is a built-in evolutionary reward system.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but if this chemical cocktail is so amazing, why doesn't it happen the second we start running? Gary is very specific that this only kicks in after about 40 minutes of road work. Why 40 minutes? Why can't I just jog for 15 minutes and get my daily dose of focus chemicals?
That goes back to evolutionary biology. Think about our ancestors on the savannah.
Okay.
The human body is designed for persistence, hunting, tracking an animal for hours until the animal collapses from heat exhaustion.
Right, because we couldn't outsprint a cheetah, but we could out-endure almost anything.
Precisely. In the first 20 to 30 minutes of exertion, your body is burning readily available blood glucose and muscle glycogen. It's an uncomfortable phase because your body is inherently lazy. It wants to conserve energy.
It's trying to talk you out of it.
It sends you pain signals, heavy breathing, burning muscles to convince you to stop and save your calories. But if you push past that initial resistance, if you keep running minute after minute, your brain eventually realizes, okay, we aren't stopping. This isn't a brief sprint away from a predator. This is a prolonged survival event.
Oh, wow. So the brain essentially realizes you're in it for the long haul, and it opens up the chemical armory to help you survive it.
Exactly. The brain flips a metabolic switch. It realizes that if you are going to survive this prolonged exertion, you need to feel less pain, and you need extreme mental clarity to spot prey or navigate terrain.
It's a survival adaptation.
So at that rough 40-minute mark, it releases the beta endorphins and norepinephrine. Gary figured out that you can manually trigger this evolutionary survival mechanism simply by running down the street for an hour.
That reframes the entire concept of discipline. We usually think of discipline as this agonizing, white-knuckled endurance, where you just force yourself to do things you hate through sheer willpower.
Which is exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
But Gary is saying that willpower is a finite resource. You don't have to white-knuckle your way through the habit forever, because if you endure the initial friction long enough, your biology takes over. Your body actually starts demanding the activity because it wants that chemical release.
It transforms discipline from a conscious effort into an unconscious craving.
It reminds me of the mechanics behind getting completely hooked on a video game. Why do people sit in dark rooms playing RPGs for 6 hours straight? It's not because staring at a screen is inherently joyful.
No, it's the reward system.
Exactly. It's because the game designers have weaponized your reward pathways. Every time you complete a quest or defeat a boss or find a hidden item, the game gives you a massive, engineered dopamine hit.
You level up.
Right, you level up, and your brain loves that feedback loop so much that it craves the next quest.
Yeah.
But what Gary is suggesting is that you can take that exact same neurological feedback loop and apply it to reality.
I like that analogy.
In this case, the avatar that is leveling up isn't a digital character on a screen. It's your own physical body. It's your own capacity for deep work. You are hacking the video game mechanics of your own brain to crave the exact difficult behaviors that make you successful.
That is a highly accurate comparison. You are enduring the initial pain to unlock the biological payoff.
Yeah.
The friction of the first few weeks is temporary, but the chemical reward system is permanent and evolutionary. Your body is quite literally designed to reward you for enduring physical hardship.
But there's a catch, right?
Yes. And this is the critical caveat Gary is making to his son. You have to push past the threshold to trigger it. If you run for 39 minutes and quit because your lungs burn, you get all of the pain, all of the sweat, and zero of the survival chemicals.
Oh man, that's the worst part.
You endure the cost, but miss the payout.
Which makes the practical takeaway for the listener incredibly clear and maybe a little daunting. You just have to push through the friction.
You do. There's no shortcut for that part.
Whether you are trying to establish a new running habit, or writing 1,000 words a day for your new book, or cold calling 50 prospects a day to build your business, there is a threshold of misery. You have to endure that misery until your biology or your momentum takes over and actually starts rewarding you. Do not quit at minute 39. Don't quit before the magic happens.
But getting to that 40-minute mark or establishing that state of positive addiction requires surviving something very specific. The very first entirely brutal attempt at the new behavior. You have to survive the initial shock to your system. And this leads us out of the realm of pure biology and directly into the profound, hidden psychological lesson embedded in Chapter 1 of these letters.
Yes. The story of the hill. I love this part of the letter because it grounds Gary's advice in his immediate physical reality at the prison.
It makes it very tangible.
Gary tells Bond about this topographical nightmare located right at the Boron camp. It is an incredibly steep hill, measuring about 0.8 of a mile around. Gary writes that when he first arrived at Boron, which was only about 3 weeks prior to him writing this specific letter, he was in such poor physical condition that he could barely walk around that darn hill once.
Just walking, it was a massive challenge.
Just walking was a massive, humiliating struggle. But he didn't stop. He writes that just 3 weeks later, he is jogging it nonstop. On the day he wrote the letter, he went around the hill 5 times, totaling 4 miles, and he managed to jog the entire 3rd lap without stopping once.
This is a huge improvement in 3 weeks.
It is. He is so confident in his progression that he places a bet with himself that before his sentence is up and he leaves prison, he will run that hill 10 times, 8 miles, completely nonstop.
It's a classic story of progressive overload. But what makes this section of the book so valuable is the commentary provided decades later by his son, Bond.
Right, because Bond adds his own perspective to the book.
Yes. Gary Halbert includes a parallel story from his own life that perfectly mirrors his father's struggle with the hill at Boron. Bond talks about a time when he got his first mountain bike and decided, with all the naive confidence of youth, to ride it from Sunset Boulevard up to Mulholland Drive.
For anyone listening who is unfamiliar with the topography of Los Angeles, that is not a casual Sunday bike ride.
Not at all.
That is a brutal incline. It is a twisting 3-mile road that pitches up to what feels like a 45-degree angle in some of those canyon spots.
It is incredibly punishing even for an experienced cyclist. On Bond's first day, his very first attempt to conquer this hill on his new mountain bike, he pedaled with everything he had.
And how far did he get?
He made it exactly 1/8 of a mile before his legs completely gave out, his lungs burned, and he collapsed on the side of the road in total humiliating defeat.
Oh, man. 1/8 of a mile on a 3-mile climb. That isn't just a failure. That is a mathematically crushing realization
Right.
of how far away the goal is. I mean, most people would throw the bike in the back of a truck and never look at that hill again.
Most people absolutely would, and that is exactly the psychological trap Gary is warning against.
But Bond didn't quit.
Bond didn't stop there. Despite the massive blow to his ego, he decided to try again the very next day. But this time, he approached the problem differently.
He changed his strategy.
He made a vow to himself.
Yeah.
He vowed that he would get off the bike and walk it if he absolutely had to, but he wouldn't quit. More importantly, he adjusted his mechanics. He purposely shifted the bike into a gear that felt almost laughably easy. He spun his legs faster, but with far less resistance.
And the result?
He made it all the way to the top of Mulholland Drive on his second attempt.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. What is the actual deep lesson here? Is this just another generic motivational poster telling us to never give up and believe in yourself?
It sounds a bit like that on the surface, sure.
Because if that's all it is, if the big secret to millions is just try hard, we could have gotten that from a fortune cookie. Why dedicate a whole section of a marketing masterclass to a story about a kid on a bicycle?
Because it isn't about blind persistence. It's about data collection and the management of the ego.
Explain that. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what does that mean?
The true soul of these two stories, Gary on his prison hill and Bond on Mulholland Drive, is the absolute non-negotiable necessity to try things at least twice. That is the operating principle.
Try things at least twice.
You must understand that all first attempts at anything worthwhile are mathematically guaranteed to be sloppy, lame, inefficient, and entirely lacking in context.
Because you literally don't know what you don't know yet. You're operating in the dark.
Exactly. You are lacking the environmental model. The human tendency, especially in adulthood, is to quit after the very first try, because the first try feels like an accurate measurement of your inherent ability.
We think, I tried this, I failed, therefore I am bad at this.
But the first try isn't a measurement of your ability at all. It is merely a measurement of your ignorance regarding the task.
That is a great way to put it.
Look at Bond's first attempt. He didn't pace himself. He didn't understand the mechanical gearing required for that specific incline. He didn't know the reality of the road's pitch around the blind corners. His failure wasn't a physical limitation, it was a knowledge deficit.
It's like trying to navigate a pitch-black room in a new house. The first time you walk through it, you are guaranteed to smash your toe into the coffee table.
Ouch. Yes.
It hurts, you curse, and you feel stupid. But that pain gives you spatial data. You now know exactly where the coffee table is.
That's a perfect example.
The second time you walk through that dark room, you subconsciously step slightly to the left. You use the data from the first painful attempt to effortlessly navigate the second attempt.
That is a brilliant illustration of neuroplasticity and environmental mapping. The first failure gave Bond a realistic assessment of the whole picture and the actual effort required.
He knew what he was up against.
When he showed up for the second attempt the next day, he wasn't operating on naive, blind enthusiasm anymore. He was operating on data. He knew he needed a lower gear, he knew he needed to conserve his breathing, and because of that data, the second attempt is often drastically easier. Not just incrementally easier, but structurally easier.
So what does this all mean for us? I really appreciate Bond's commentary here, where he brings up the analogy of learning to ride a bike as a kid. When children learn to ride a two-wheeler, the process almost universally ends in blood, scraped knees, tears, and falling over into the grass.
Just a painful process.
But kids generally get back on the bike. They don't conceptualize the pain of falling as a reason to permanently abandon the entire concept of bicycles. They accept the friction as part of the learning process.
Because they don't have that adult ego yet.
Right. But as people get older, as we become adults, we lose that resilience. Our egos harden. We start deciding if we like something or if we are good at something based purely on our first messy, uncomfortable experience.
The adult ego is incredibly fragile because it expects immediate competence. We have spent our adult lives building up a facade of capability in our chosen professions, so when we are forced back into the role of a novice, the psychological friction is immense.
You see this in business constantly. An entrepreneur tries a new marketing strategy. Let's say they decide to launch a cold email campaign.
Oh, that's a classic example.
They write one generic email, sends you 100 people on a Tuesday, get 0 replies, and maybe one angry response telling them to unsubscribe. And what do?
They quit.
They immediately declare, well, email marketing doesn't work for my business. My industry is different. They take the scraped knee of their sloppy first attempt and use it as a permanent excuse to quit.
It's the ultimate tragedy of adult learning. The old cliche is that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But that isn't biologically true.
Oh.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks, not because the dog's brain is neurologically incapable of learning, but because the old dog quits the moment he doesn't get the trick immediately.
I see.
His ego cannot handle the indignity of a sloppy first attempt. He wants the reward without the friction of the learning curve.
But I want to argue the other side of this for a moment. Time is our most valuable asset.
Yeah.
What if something actually is a waste of time?
That's a valid concern.
If I try a new software platform for my business and it is confusing, buggy, and terrible on day one, why should I waste my time trying it a second time? Aren't there instances where the first attempt gives you all the data you need to know that something is a bad fit?
You have to differentiate between an external system failing you and your internal lack of aptitude failing the system. If a piece of software is objectively broken, yes, abandon it.
Fair enough.
But Gary Halbert is talking about acquiring skills and enduring physical or mental exertion. He is talking about writing copy, negotiating, understanding human psychology, or, running a hill. In those domains of skill acquisition, the initial friction is almost never a sign that the endeavor is worthless.
What is it then?
It is simply the tax you pay to cross from ignorance to understanding. You have to separate your ego's desire to be instantly good at something from the objective reality of the learning curve.
So we really need to challenge you, the listener, directly on this concept. Think about the people in your industry who are standing at the top of the mountain, the people generating the millions, writing the best copy, building the biggest audiences.
The ones you look up to.
The fundamental difference between them and the people staring out from the bottom of the hill usually isn't raw intellect. It isn't a secret growth hack.
No, it's not.
It is simply the willingness to show up the next day for a second shot. That's it. They survived the embarrassment of their first attempt.
They allowed themselves to be foolish novices long enough to collect the data required to become experts.
So I want you to commit right now.
Yeah.
Make a binding deal with yourself today. Give any hard endeavor, whether it's starting that morning roadwork routine Gary talks about, launching a new product line, recording your first piece of content, or learning a new financial skill. Give at least 2 distinct, separate, fully committed attempts before you allow yourself to judge your own ability.
That is fantastic advice.
Expect the first attempt to be an absolute disaster. Actually, welcome the disaster. Go in expecting to scrape your knee because that disaster is just the mandatory data gathering phase for the second attempt.
And that profound psychological shift regarding failure brings us perfectly to the grand synthesis of everything Gary Halbert is desperately trying to teach his son in this very first letter.
How does it all tie together?
Well, if we zoom out and tie all of these seemingly disparate ideas together, the mandate for daily road work, the biological pursuit of survival chemicals, the necessity of enduring sloppy first attempts, we arrive at the core insight that represents the very soul of Chapter 1.
And what is that insight?
The grand takeaway from the Boron Letters is that resilience is a physical property before it is a mental one.
Wow, that is such a heavy, powerful concept. Let's make sure that lands. Resilience is a physical property first.
It has to be. You cannot construct a resilient, unshakable mind on top of a fragile, neglected biological foundation.
You just can't. The hardware doesn't support it.
Gary Halbert's letters, written from the stark reality of a prison camp, prove that to be a true master of markets, money, and human persuasion, you cannot just rely on clever tactics or theoretical strategies. You must first master your own biology.
It starts with the body.
Your body's movement, that grueling hour-long road work, is the mechanism that clears the metabolic fog from your mind. That sustained physical exertion creates the positive chemical momentum, the endorphins and norepinephrine, that make daily discipline sustainable rather than agonizing.
Because your body starts craving it.
Exactly. And most importantly, voluntarily enduring that physical friction day after day physically trains your nervous system to survive the inevitable, sloppy first attempts of any new business venture. You are quite literally training your brain to handle the immense stress, rejection, and uncertainty of entrepreneurship simply by forcing yourself to run up a hill when you don't want to.
So you've got your marching orders. You are going to get your physical routine locked in tomorrow morning. You're going to eat that banana, hit the road, and flesh out your system.
Get that RAM cleared.
You have committed to pushing past the 40-minute mark to unlock those survival chemicals, and you are officially armed with the psychological framework to survive your sloppy, embarrassing first attempts at your next big project.
You are physically primed and mentally clear.
But here is the reality of the business world. What happens when you take this pristine, newfound clarity? You step out your front door and you run face first into toxic partners, aggressively manipulative competitors, and a world filled with naysayers who are actively trying to pull you down to their level.
Because that will inevitably happen.
It absolutely will. All the road work in the world won't save you if you let the wrong people into your inner circle. How do you take this physical resilience and build an impenetrable mental armor to protect it?
That is a completely different kind of survival.
It is, and that is exactly the dark, necessary reality we are going to explore in our next deep dive into the Boron Letters. So stay curious, get your road work in, and we'll see you then. So what if the ultimate secret to business survival was written from the confines of a federal prison camp?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a strong start.
Right.
Yep.
And hidden inside this really unsettling story about a sadistic cat, and then somehow wrapped up in a super controversial lesson on, like, skipping breakfast?
It sounds totally bizarre. I mean, almost contradictory, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You certainly wouldn't expect to find the foundational principles of entrepreneurial resilience nestled between descriptions of prison yard cats and very specific instructions on eating bran cereal.
No, you really wouldn't. But that is the reality sitting in front of us today, because we are continuing to unpack the legendary Boron Letters.
Yes, we are.
Specifically diving into the contents of Chapter 2. And today you are going to learn how to forge this impenetrable layer of mental armor.
Which is so crucial.
It really is. Plus, you'll discover why building a highly disciplined physical routine is actually a core business strategy,
Right.
not just like health advice.
Right.
And we're going to uncover why staying absolutely, strictly silent about your biggest goals is your single greatest advantage.
Yeah, that part is mind-blowing.
Seriously.
Yeah.
This matters deeply for anyone trying to build a business, launch a project, or achieve anything of significance. Because, well, reaching that level requires ordering your life for maximum resilience in a world that is fundamentally unfair.
Yeah, it's a profound set of instructions. And what strikes me immediately about this particular letter is the setting itself.
The prison camp.
Exactly. We are not reading the sanitized reflections of a CEO sitting in a corner office somewhere. We are reading the immediate, raw thoughts of Gary Halbert sitting inside the Boron Federal Prison Camp, writing to his youngest son, Bond.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right there with the reality of his environment.
Let's do it.
So Gary begins this letter by talking about a very specific shift in his mindset that occurred like right after he arrived at the camp. He mentions having this initial meeting with the people who run the camp, the guards, the administrators, you know.
Yeah, the people in charge.
Right. And he walks out of that meeting with the stark realization that these people are, in his own words, total jerks.
Which is just, I mean, think about the psychological weight of that specific realization.
It'd have to be terrifying.
It really is.
Yeah.
When you are incarcerated, you are stripped of your autonomy entirely. You're completely at the mercy of a massive, indifferent system.
Right, you can't just leave.
Exactly. And realizing that the specific individuals holding the keys to your daily existence, the people who decide when you eat, where you sleep, what you wear.
Everything.
Yeah, everything. Realizing they are entirely unreasonable and prone to flexing their authority for no good reason, well, that's a heavy burden.
I can't even imagine.
For most individuals, that realization is crushing. It leads directly to despair, depression, or this profound sense of learned helplessness.
Yeah, that's the typical response, right? You just sort of surrender to the environment.
You give up.
But Gary writes that instead of getting down and depressed, he crossed this invisible mental line. He says he simply got tougher.
Which sounds a bit like a movie trope, honestly.
I know, right? I have to pause here because whenever I hear someone say they quote-unquote got tough in prison, it sounds like a cinematic cliche.
Like he's lifting weights in the yard and scowling.
Exactly. It sounds like someone putting on a macho front just to survive.
It does sound like a trope if you just take it at face value. But if we look at the commentary provided later by his son, Bond, a completely different picture emerges.
Okay, how so?
Well, Bond clarifies that his father wasn't faking a tough guy persona at all. At his core, Gary absolutely hated cruelty. He had a deep-seated intolerance for mean people who abused their authority.
Oh, interesting. So the cruelty of the guards didn't break him, it acted as a catalyst.
Exactly the opposite of breaking him. When Gary recognized that the people running Boron were willing to use their structural power to cause unnecessary grief, it triggered his internal defenses.
Wow.
It mobilized the psychological hardening. He wasn't acting tough to intimidate other inmates. He was forging mental armor to protect his own psyche from the petty cruelty of the administration.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the difference between aggressive posturing and defensive resilience.
Yeah, exactly.
And bringing this out of the prison context, for the listener, this feels like a universally required survival skill, especially in entrepreneurship or corporate environment.
Oh, absolutely. Unavoidably.
Because you are inevitably going to encounter gatekeepers who hold a power advantage over you. Right.
Unavoidably. I mean, it might be a vendor who knows you depend on their supply chain.
Yeah.
Or a mid-level regulator who just enjoys the bureaucracy.
Ooh.
Or, an algorithm reviewer at a massive tech platform, or even a competitor with vastly more capital.
So true.
And the harsh reality is that some of those entities will use that power imbalance to cause you grief simply because they have the leverage to do so.
They flex because they can.
Right.
And if you haven't built that mental armor beforehand, that realization can completely derail you.
It really can.
You can spend weeks paralyzed by how, quote unquote, unfair a platform policy change is, or how unreasonable a vendor is being.
And whining doesn't fix it.
Nope. Gary is saying you have to cross that invisible mental line yourself. You have to move from feeling like a victim of circumstance to adopting a hardened, impenetrable resilience.
And the fascinating thing is that the people running Boron didn't teach Gary to be tough.
Right.
They didn't offer a masterclass in resilience or anything. They simply created an environment so abrasive that it forced his inherent toughness to surface.
Sink or swim.
Exactly. The lesson for the listener is to proactively build that armor now, before the environment forces your hand.
That is so powerful. And to really drive this concept home, Gary shares a story in the letter.
Oh boy, the cat story.
Yeah, the cat story. And I have to admit, when I first read this section, I was completely thrown off.
It's weird.
It is. He pivots from talking about mindset straight into this incredibly vivid, slightly disturbing story about a cat that lives on the prison grounds.
It is a very jarring narrative shift, but it actually serves as the philosophical anchor for the entire chapter.
It really does. So let me set the scene for you. Gary is out doing his morning run down a hill at the camp, and he spots this arrogant old tomcat named Crackers.
Great name for a cat, honestly.
Right. But Crackers has just caught a tiny creature, an antelope ground squirrel.
Yeah, poor thing.
And Gary makes a point to note how cute these little squirrels are. But Crackers doesn't just kill the squirrel for food. He brings it over near Gary, drops it on the ground, and just watches it.
Just staring at it.
The squirrel is terrified, obviously, lying there. Finally, it starts to stir, tries to make a desperate run for it, and Crackers just effortlessly snatches it back up.
He is playing with his food, but in a highly psychological way.
It's pure torment. He repeats this process over and over. He bats the squirrel around with his paws.
Oh, man.
Then Gary describes how Crackers would pick the squirrel up in his mouth, toss his head back, throw the creature up into the air, and bat it back and forth midair.
That's awful.
Like he's playing a twisted game of handball with a living thing until the squirrel has absolutely no fight left in it.
Yeah, it's brutal.
So I have to ask, why is a brilliant marketing mind dedicating precious space in a letter to his son to document a brutal little nature scene?
Well, I mean, it seems like a strange tangent until you reach the conclusion of the story.
Okay.
Gary later mentions this incident to another inmate, and the inmate's response reveals the actual point of all this.
What does he say?
The inmate waves off the story and says, yeah, but that stupid Crackers is nothing but a stupid punk.
A punk?
Yeah. He proceeds to tell Gary that Crackers, the arrogant tormentor of squirrels, constantly gets whipped and takes absolute trash from a larger black cat that lives over by the housing area.
Ah, so there is always a bigger cat.
Always. And that realization prompts Gary to share a quote that summarizes his entire observation of the camp, the cats, and life in general.
I know exactly what quote you're talking about.
He recalls reading an article where someone stated, "There is no justice. There is only power."
There is no justice. There is only power. I struggled with that line initially, I won't lie.
It's heavy.
It sounds incredibly cynical. If we accept that premise, aren't we just giving up on the idea of building ethical, fair businesses, it feels like an endorsement of ruthless behavior.
I see why it feels that way, for sure. But I would argue it's not an endorsement of ruthless behavior at all. It's an objective observation of environmental reality.
Okay, unpack that for me.
It is a navigational tool. Think of it like gravity.
Gravity.
Yeah, gravity doesn't care if you are a good person or a bad person. If you step off a ledge, you will fall. You don't complain that gravity is unfair. You accept its absolute power, and you build an airplane to navigate it.
Oh, wow. That is a phenomenal way to look at it. Hoping for gravity to be fair is just a waste of time.
Precisely. If you are an entrepreneur or if you are trying to push a major initiative forward in a massive corporation, hoping for justice is a trap that will get you eaten alive.
It really will.
Hoping for fairness from your competitors, from the open market, or from the people who hold the purse strings is a complete illusion. If you operate under the assumption that the business world is fair, you will be caught completely off guard when the quote-unquote crackers of your industry start batting you around simply because they have the market share to do so.
You end up playing the role of the squirrel.
Exactly.
You get batted around, you try to run, you get snatched back up, and you eventually lose your will to fight because you're waiting for an external referee to step in and blow the whistle.
Yeah.
But there is no referee.
None. The system itself is the guards at Boron. The market is the arrogant tomcat.
Wow.
If you accept that there is only power, you immediately stop whining about the lack of justice. You stop writing long, angry posts about how the algorithm ruined your business. Instead, you start focusing entirely on your own leverage. You focus on building your own strength.
Which brings us perfectly to the next major section of the letter. Because Gary doesn't just deliver this heavy philosophical realization and leave it there.
No, he doesn't.
He immediately pivots into the practical application. How do you build that leverage? How do you forge that armor? And he does it by establishing a rigid physical routine.
Yeah, the transition from the mental abstract to the physical reality. In his framework, the two are inextricably linked.
Totally. He tells his son that he is doing what he calls road work, walking, jogging, or running every single morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he explicitly states that he does this to, quote, order the day. Then he implements a full day of fasting.
Which is tough.
Very tough. Every single Saturday, he eats absolutely nothing. And he says this is to order the week.
The word order is the critical component here. Remember the environment he's in.
Right, the prison.
He is stranded in a federal facility where he has almost zero control over his existence. The state dictates his schedule. By instituting the morning road work and the weekly fast, he is reclaiming ultimate authority over the only thing he truly owns.
His own body.
Yes, his physical vessel.
It's a reclamation of autonomy. And he gets very prescriptive about how to maintain that vessel.
Oh, he really does.
He insists that his 15-year-old son follows specific dietary advice. He tells Bond to eat fruit before lunch, specifically bananas, apples, or oranges.
Yeah.
He explains that fruit provides potassium, vitamins, and pectin. He actually refers to fruit as nature's broom, suggesting it helps keep the internal system cleaned out.
Nature's broom. It's a very visceral, utilitarian way to view digestion. He is looking at the body entirely in terms of internal efficiency.
Yeah, and he goes further. He tells Bond to eat a large bowl of a bran-type cereal, heavily recommending grape nuts.
Grape nuts.
Grape nuts.
Yeah.
And then he assigns homework. He tells his son to go to a health food store and track down 2 specific books, The Miracle of Fasting by Paul Bragg and Are You Confused by Paulo Arola.
Very specific reading list.
Very specific. Now, I have to play devil's advocate for a moment here.
Sure, go for it.
This sounds like standard, somewhat dated health advice from a father to a son. Eat your fruit, get your fiber, go for a run. How does eating a dense bowl of grape nuts translate to building a multi-million-dollar business empire?
On the surface, I completely agree. It does seem like a mundane parental lecture. But when we layer in the context provided by Bond's later commentary, the strategic depth of this advice becomes apparent.
Okay, tell me more.
Bond reveals that his father actually abused his body quite heavily in the first half of his life. He struggled with junk food and heavy drinking.
So he wasn't exactly a lifelong health guru.
No, not at all. He was a guy who fell in and out of healthy habits.
Interesting.
But here is the crucial insight. Even during his heaviest drinking days, Gary fundamentally understood a core physiological truth that drove his success as a writer. He knew that how you feel affects how you think.
That's a great line.
Right. Even when he was living chaotically, when it was time to sit down and produce world-class, high-converting copy, he knew he had to clean up his act. He would dry out, eat right, and nourish his brain to get back into the optimal cognitive zone.
So he recognized that the physical machine is the engine for cognitive output.
Yes. And I think we often rely on tired cliches here, like, comparing the human body to a car engine that needs premium fuel.
Yeah, you hear that all the time.
But a better analogy for knowledge workers and entrepreneurs today is to think of your body and mind like a smartphone operating system.
Ooh, okay. Walk me through that.
If you eat a heavy, terrible meal, or if your digestive system is sluggish, it is the equivalent of having 50 resource-heavy apps running in the background of your phone.
Oh man, that makes so much sense.
Your battery is draining rapidly, your processor is overheating, and the screen is lagging. You literally cannot execute complex, high-level tasks like writing sales copy or strategizing a business pivot because your system's energy is entirely consumed by the background task of processing garbage.
Wow.
Gary's focus on nature's broom, on grape nuts, and on fasting is about aggressively closing all those background apps.
That is such a vivid analogy. He is freeing up systemic bandwidth. So when he fasts on a Saturday, he is effectively doing a hard reset on the operating system. He explicitly states that fasting gives the mind and body a rest. It normalizes bodily functions.
And it builds an incredible amount of behavioral discipline, too.
Oh, for sure.
Think about the willpower required to deny your most basic biological urge hunger for a full 24 hours.
It's intense.
If you can build the psychological muscle to look at food, feel hunger, and say no to yourself, you are building a muscle that translates directly to business.
Because it's the same mechanism.
Exactly. It is the same discipline required to stay focused on a long-term campaign when you are exhausted, or to remain silent when a competitor is baiting you.
And the texts note that this physical foundation paid off in the long run.
It did.
When Gary passed away at the age of 67, which appeared to be from hereditary heart issues, as his own father died of similar causes at 59, the medical examiner specifically noted that Gary was in terrific shape. He had built a resilient vessel.
He recognized that you cannot sustain high-performance output if your physical infrastructure is crumbling.
Right.
The practical takeaway for anyone listening is that you have to completely discard the notion that your physical health is a separate category from your business strategy.
They're one and the same.
They are not separate. Your body and your mind are the foundational infrastructure of your enterprise. You need daily habits to set the rhythm of your day, and weekly habits, like a day of fasting or true strategic rest, to reset your focus.
Which naturally leads to a massive friction point.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you start implementing these radical changes, when you start fasting, running every morning, or quietly building a massive business, the people around you notice. And they usually have opinions.
They always have opinions. And this brings us to what I consider the most fascinating psychological insight in the entire chapter.
Oh, absolutely. So Gary gives his son one incredibly specific, rigid rule regarding the fasting protocol. He writes very clearly, do not tell other people what you are doing.
He demands absolute silence.
He anticipates the pushback.
He does. He warns Bon that most people simply will not understand the concept of fasting. And if you attempt to explain it to them, all you are going to receive in return is a lot of ignorant babble.
Ignorant babble. It's a brilliant phrase because it captures the exact tone of uninvited, uninformed feedback.
It really does.
But Bon's commentary expands this instruction far beyond the realm of skipping a meal. Bon points out that this rule of silence is a foundational law that applies to all ambitious goals.
It applies anytime you attempt to elevate your status. Now, in today's digital landscape, the prevailing advice is exactly the opposite.
Totally.
We are told to build in public. We are told to announce our goals on social media, to build an audience, to get accountability, to share the journey. Gary's advice completely flies in the face of that modern consensus.
Yeah, it does, and for a very scientifically grounded reason. When you set out to achieve something grand, whether that is building a multi-million-dollar company, radically transforming your physique, or even just adopting an unconventional diet, regular people will instinctively attempt to stop you.
They come out of the woodwork to tell you why it won't work.
Oh, constantly.
And they almost always disguise it as genuine concern. They say things like, oh, I just don't want you to burn out, or I read an article saying that 90% of new startups fail, or isn't fasting dangerous for your metabolism?
Yeah, the disguise of concern is very common. But the source material breaks down why they do this, and it is vital to understand.
Right.
It is rarely born out of conscious malice. It is an unconscious, psychological self-defense mechanism.
This was the part that blew my mind. The idea that your pursuit of success actually makes them feel bad.
It creates profound psychological discomfort.
Mm,
Human beings rely heavily on peer comparison to judge their own standing in life.
we do.
We look at the people we grew up with, the people we work next to, and the people in our social circle to determine if we're doing quote-unquote okay.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly. If you, their peer, suddenly break out of the pack and begin to achieve massive success, it destroys their internal narrative.
Yeah.
It forces them to look in the mirror and question their own life choices.
It eliminates all of their comfortable excuses.
Precise.
If you, the person who had the same background, the same education, and the same resources, can achieve a massive goal, then the only reason they haven't achieved it is because they didn't try hard enough or they gave up. And that is an agonizing realization to face.
It really is. It is much easier to pull you back down to their level than it is to elevate themselves to yours.
Crab mentality.
Exactly. This is why you will see people who openly claim they want to be wealthy, simultaneously mocking or criticizing anyone in their peer group who is actually taking the risks required to get wealthy. It is an irrational hostility born entirely out of self-preservation.
And the text provides an incredible historical example to illustrate the absolute futility of trying to argue with this kind of psychological resistance.
Yes, the doctor story.
Bond brings up the story of the Australian doctor who discovered a non-surgical cure for stomach ulcers.
It is the perfect historical parallel to the concept of the naysayer defense. It moves the concept from personal ambition to professional consensus.
Let's explore that because the context is wild.
It really is. So, at the time, the entire global medical establishment absolutely knew, with a capital K, that the human stomach was far too acidic an environment for any organisms or bacteria to survive.
It was undisputed fact.
Undisputed. It wasn't just a theory, it was established scientific dogma. But this Australian doctor hypothesized that ulcers were, in fact, caused by organisms living in the stomach lining.
And when he presented this hypothesis to his peers, he wasn't met with scientific curiosity.
No, not at all.
He was treated as a heretic, the establishment ridiculed him, he was punished for daring to challenge what everyone inherently, quote-unquote, knew to be true.
He spent a massive amount of time and energy trying to convince other doctors that he was right. He was presenting papers, arguing at conferences, trying to win the intellectual debate against the ignorant babble of the medical community.
But eventually he hit a wall.
He did. He realized the absolute futility of trying to change their minds with words.
The mechanism of belief preservation in a crowd is too strong to be defeated by debate.
Exactly. So he stopped arguing. He completely ignored his critics, went back to his practice, and simply started treating and curing patients based on his organism theory.
He just did the work.
He stayed silent and did the work.
He shifted from attempting to persuade to attempting to demonstrate. He let the undeniable reality of cured patients do the talking.
And he had to cure several people before the medical community was finally forced to pay attention. The results became too obvious to ignore.
The lesson here for the listener is profound, especially when it comes to resource management. Arguing with people who are deeply psychologically committed to their own limitations is a massive drain on your entrepreneurial energy. A massive drain.
Every day, you wake up with a finite amount of cognitive and emotional fuel. If you spend that fuel trying to convince your skeptical family members, your risk-averse friends, or your cynical peers that your business idea is viable, you are burning the exact fuel you need to actually execute the idea.
You are trying to convince people who are psychologically incentivized to see you fail, or at least to see you remain average. It is a game you cannot win.
The established beliefs of the crowd, the naysayers, are rarely, if ever, overturned by logical debate. They are only overturned by silent, undeniable achievement.
Which brings us to the practical takeaway for this section. And I will admit, it might be the hardest advice to actually implement, but it is undoubtedly the most important.
Oh, for sure.
When you have a massive goal, keep your mouth shut. Keep it entirely to yourself. Do not waste a single ounce of your daily energy trying to convince the naysayers, and absolutely do not seek their validation. It's a trap.
If you desperately need to talk about your goals, find a mentor or a peer group of people who have already achieved what you are trying to achieve. But to the rest of the world, stay completely silent. Put your head down, do your morning road work, build your business, and let your undeniable results speak for you.
It is the ultimate real-world application of the mental armor we discussed at the very beginning of this exploration. By staying silent, You are actively sealing your fragile ideas off from the toxic influence of the crowd.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by examining the harsh realities of a prison yard, analyzing the power dynamics of a sadistic tomcat, and unpacking the psychological requirement of mental armor.
We really did.
We transitioned into the biological and cognitive necessities of ordering your physical vessel through fruit, complex carbohydrates, and disciplined fasting. And finally, we explored the deeply flawed psychology of peer groups and the medical establishment to understand the immense power of absolute silence.
It all connects.
It does. So how do we pull all of these threads together? What is the core unifying philosophy that ties these seemingly disparate lessons into a single insight?
Well, when you synthesize all of these concepts, they point directly to a singular unifying principle. I call it the principle of radical internal control.
Radical internal control. I like that.
Look at the landscape Gary describes to his son. He is existing in a world where there is no justice, only power. A reality symbolized by the petty cruelty of the guards and the dominance hierarchy of the cats.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, he is navigating a social reality where your own peers will actively try to drag you down with ignorant babble to protect their own fragile egos. In a world defined by those two harsh, uncontrollable external realities, the only true power you possess is the power you exercise over yourself.
You cannot control the fairness of the guards, you cannot control the algorithm or the market, and you certainly cannot control the jealousy of the naysayers.
Exactly. You can only control your response. By ordering your day with disciplined morning exercise, by ordering your week with the physiological reset of fasting, and by ordering your mouth with absolute silence regarding your ambitions, you are forging the ultimate entrepreneurial armor.
It's a shield.
You are constructing a physical and mental engine that is entirely independent of the unfairness and the negativity of the outside world. You stop waiting for the world to accommodate you, and you start building a vessel capable of navigating the world as it actually is. That is radical internal control.
By mastering your internal environment, you render the unfairness of the external world irrelevant to your ultimate success. Which leaves us with one final thought to consider. We spend so much time in business thinking about how to get noticed, how to make noise, and how to command attention.
We do. Everything is about going viral.
Right. But if the principles in this letter hold true, what if the ultimate test of your personal power isn't how loud you can roar when you finally win? What if the true test is how completely, terrifyingly silent you can remain while you are painstakingly building the weapon that will change everything?
Wow.
What if anonymity in the early stages of ambition is actually the greatest luxury you have?
That's a powerful thought to end on.
Now that you have the blueprint to build the impenetrable physical and mental armor required to survive the harsh realities of the market, you are finally ready for the offensive strategy. Join us next time for another deep dive as we discover exactly how to bypass the devastating guesswork of product creation and learn how to locate the starving crowds who are already desperate to buy whatever it is you are selling.
In 1984, there was this guy sitting in a federal prison camp, basically surrounded by bank robbers, hitmen, embezzlers.
Right, not your typical business environment.
Exactly. And from inside this prison, he wrote a series of letters to his 16-year-old son. But he didn't just, give him standard fatherly advice. He actually handed him this exact, completely unfiltered blueprint that had generated billions of dollars in sales all over the globe.
It's wild, honestly. I mean, we are talking about an absolute masterclass in human psychology, persuasion, and making millions of dollars. And it was all penned on a typewriter behind barbed wire.
It really is wild. And that's our hook for today's deep dive into a legendary collection known as the Boron Letters.
Yeah, it completely shatters our expectations of where genius actually comes from, We're so conditioned to look for business wisdom in, sleek Ivy League lecture halls or highly polished TED Talks.
100%.
But the reality of human behavior, how we actually make decisions, how we lie to ourselves, and what makes us actually open our wallets well, that's often best understood by someone who has been stripped of every single luxury. Someone forced to view the world with zero polite filters.
That is the perfect way to frame what we are doing today. So what you're about to learn over the next hour is the raw, uncut truth about what makes people tick and, more importantly, what makes them buy. This matters for anyone interested in business, entrepreneurship, or just human nature because it removes all the fluff.
Right. And the author, Gary Halbert, is widely considered by industry insiders to be, one of the greatest copywriters and direct marketing minds in history.
Yeah, he made fortunes, he lost fortunes, built these massive empires, and eventually A business mistake landed him in California's Boron federal prison camp,
And while he was serving his sentence, he wrote these letters to his youngest son, Bond.
which is incredible. And we are so fortunate that Bond later published these letters, and he even included his own modern commentary. Gary Halbert wasn't just some theorist writing a textbook. He was a practitioner who lived a very eccentric roller coaster kind of life.
He'd been eulogized, ostracized, plagiarized, you name it. Sitting in that prison camp, stripped of his wealth and his freedom, he was basically trying to pass down his life's ultimate secrets before they were lost forever.
Yeah, Bond actually describes the experience of reading these letters as a mental kick to the head. And honestly, after spending hours immersed in this material, I completely agree. So our mission today is to extract Gary's timeless secrets on marketing, market research, and personal resilience, and really map them directly onto the world you and I live in today.
And what's vital to understand right up front is that you don't need to be an advertiser to get value out of this.
Not at all.
It's a crash course on reality. It is a study of human nature.
Exactly. So, to you listening right now, even if you have zero interest in selling things by mail or launching an e-commerce brand or writing copy, do not go anywhere. Because this deep dive is going to reveal some profound and sometimes pretty uncomfortable truths about your own behavior.
Oh, it definitely will.
We're going to look at how we all make irrational decisions,
Yeah.
how we deceive ourselves about what we actually want, and crucially, how you can protect your own mental energy when you inevitably face the mean streets of life.
We basically have to start by learning to see the world as it actually is, rather than how we wish it were. And Gary begins that lesson in really the most unexpected way possible.
I'm so glad you brought that up because the very first thing that shocked me about this collection is the opening. Like, you'd assume letter number one from a marketing genius would dive straight into headlines, right?
Oh.
Or profit margins or consumer psychology.
Right. You'd expect a syllabus on business.
Yeah, but it's not. The first few letters are entirely, obsessively about his physical routine.
Yeah, it's all about the body.
Gary writes to his teenage son about getting up early to do road work, which is his term for walking, jogging, and running. He talks about running the hill at the prison camp. He writes about his diet in this excruciating detail.
Eating bananas before a run, right?
Exactly. Forcing down a big bowl of bran flakes, eating raw vegetables throughout the day. And this is the real kicker, fasting for one full day every single week.
He was laying the absolute foundation. Gary operated on a very explicit, non-negotiable rule, which was how you feel affects how you think.
Yeah.
He recognized decades before the current wellness trend that the mind and the body are not separate entities, They are a single interconnected system.
Right, they feed into each other.
Exactly. If you want to perform at the highest level intellectually, if you want to be a top-tier problem solver, a master persuader, or just a resilient human being, you cannot do it if your physical vessel is sluggish or compromised or running on toxic fuel.
And he was incredibly strict about it, almost punishingly so. He talks about how when he first arrived at Boron, he was out of shape. He could barely walk around the steep hill on the prison grounds, which was about 0.8 of a mile.
But he kept at it.
Yeah, day after day, week after week, until he was running it 10 times nonstop. That's 8 miles a day in the California heat. And he makes it really clear to his son, he wasn't doing this to become an Olympian. He was doing it for mental clarity.
He actually describes the physiological response in the letters, which is fascinating. He talks about the release of beta endorphins and norepinephrine after about 40 minutes of sustained running. He calls it a positive addiction.
Which makes sense.
Think about the environment he was in,
Right.
A federal prison is high stress, high stakes, deeply unpredictable. Maintaining your mental armor in that setting is literally a matter of survival.
Yeah, absolutely.
The physical exertion was his mechanism for clearing out emotional garbage. It drained off the ambient tension and anxiety of the prison yard so he could actually sit down at his typewriter, focus his mind, and write brilliant, world-class copy.
He even developed a diagnostic tool for his own brain to ensure he was operating at peak capacity. He tells his son about an acronym HLLT. H-A-L-T.
Right. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yes. He warns Bond to never, ever make a significant decision when experiencing any of those 4 states. And to make sure he wasn't lying to himself about his own state of mind, he had this brilliant little test.
The time-guessing game.
Yeah. He would test his awareness by trying to guess what time it was without looking at a clock. If his guess was off by more than 7 minutes, he knew his brain was compromised. He knew he was stressed, distracted, or, slipping into one of those HLT states.
The underlying neuroscience of the HLT concept is honestly fascinating. When you're hungry, your brain experiences a drop in glucose, right? which directly impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for impulse control and long-term planning. Wow.
And when you're angry or tired, your amygdala, which is the threat detection center, it takes over, making you reactive rather than strategic. So if Gary failed his time-guessing test, if he was off by more than 7 minutes, he wouldn't push through and try to negotiate a business deal or write an important letter.
He just...
He would step back, he'd go take a walk, do some road work, or just lay low until his mental acuity returned.
And Bond provides a really great modern update to this in his commentary. He says he uses Sudoku puzzles to test his own mental sharpness before he starts his workday.
That's such a good idea.
Right. If he can rip through a diabolical level Sudoku quickly, he knows his synapses are firing and he's ready to write. If he struggles, if he's just staring blankly at the numbers, he knows he's off and needs to recalibrate before touching his business.
It's a profound strategy for anyone navigating a demanding career. The brain is an organ. It requires nourishment, rest, and a warm-up. If you try to force high-level creative or strategic work when you are in a state of HLA, you're going to make poor decisions.
In business, bad decisions cost money. Exactly. In prison, as Gary notes, bad decisions can cost you your safety or result in a longer sentence.
But okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I want to push back on this. There's a specific part of his physical advice that feels a little jarring.
Okay, what's that?
He tells his 16-year-old son to lift weights specifically to build big biceps. I mean, isn't fasting once a week and doing bicep curls a really strange, almost antiquated way to teach a kid how to sell informational reports by mail?
I can see how it sounds that way.
It feels a bit like telling a software engineer that the key to writing better code is learning how to street fight, you know? Isn't this just a reflection of prison survival tactics bleeding into his business advice?
Well, it's easy to dismiss it as macho posturing, sure. But if you look at the evolutionary psychology behind his advice, it makes perfect sense for both the prison yard and the boardroom. Because prison is just a microcosm of society with all the polite, civilized filters stripped away.
Yeah.
It is predatory by nature. Gary tells Bond specifically to develop strong, muscular arms, not to become a professional bodybuilder, but to look lean, hard, and capable. Why? Because of a core principle Gary observed, which is defensive behavior invites aggressive action.
Man. Defensive behavior invites aggressive action. That line really sat with me.
It's a harsh truth. If you walk around projecting weakness, if your shoulders are slumped, if you shuffle around looking scared or submissive, predators will target you.
Yeah.
In the animal kingdom, predators look for the straggler, right? The one projecting vulnerability.
Yeah, the weak gazelle.
Exactly. Human beings unconsciously do the exact same thing. In life, and especially in high-stakes business negotiations, there is very little sympathy for a weakling. People can unconsciously smell vulnerability.
So you're saying the bicep curls weren't about vanity, and they weren't even about preparing to literally fight someone. They were about nonverbal communication.
Precisely. Gary wanted his son to build physical strength so he could project a self-reliant aura. It was about avoiding fights altogether. It was about carrying yourself with a quiet, undeniable toughness that deters people from messing with you in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you walk into a negotiation or a sales pitch or even just a difficult conversation with a boss, your physical posture dictates the dynamic before you ever even open your mouth.
It's like the ultimate peace through strength argument, but applied to personal biology. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be mean. You just have to be undeniably self-reliant. You rely on your own demonstrated strength instead of hoping for someone else's compassion.
And this directly translates to his business philosophy. When Gary felt weak, compromised, or off, he wouldn't engage in negotiations. He wouldn't try to close a deal. He would literally hide out, fast, pump iron, read, and rebuild his strength until he could re-emerge projecting total confidence. Because as he warns Bond, people in business can sniff out a winner, and they can absolutely smell it when you are desperate. You cannot fake that kind of core confidence. You have to actually possess it.
Okay, that makes total sense. So he builds this impenetrable physical and mental armor. He establishes a baseline of physical reality for himself, stripping away his own ego and biological weaknesses. And once he does that, he takes that exact same ruthless, reality-based perspective and turns it outward toward the business world.
Right, he applies it to how we view customers and products.
Exactly. And this is where we get into the absolute core of his marketing genius. This is the big paradigm shift.
What's fascinating here is how he introduces this concept to his students.
Yes. Gary used to teach copywriting and marketing classes, and he would always start his seminars with a specific hypothetical question for his students. He'd ask, if you and I both owned a hamburger stand and we were in a contest to see who would sell the most hamburgers, what advantages would you most like to have on your side?
Yes, such a brilliant trap.
It really is, because the students would give all the logical, traditional business school answers. They'd say they want the highest quality grass-fed meat, or they'd want the secret sauce, or sesame seed buns, or, the absolute best location with the most foot traffic.
Or the ability to underprice the competition.
Right. Every single answer is focused on the product or the operations, but Gary would listen to all of them, let them exhaust all their ideas, and then he'd drop the hammer.
Oh, I love this part.
He'd say, I will give you every single advantage you asked for. I will give you the best meat, the best location, and the cheapest prices. I only want one advantage, and if you give it to me, I will whip the pants off all of you.
And his answer? A starving crowd.
A starving crowd. It just completely upends traditional business thinking.
It really does.
Yeah.
Most entrepreneurs, creators, and companies, they think of a product first. They spend months or even years perfecting a product in a vacuum, and then they try to figure out who to sell it to. They try to manufacture desire.
Yeah, pushing a boulder up a hill.
Gary is basically screaming from this prison cell, you must become a student of markets, not products.
I love the analogy of trying to sell a glass of water. If you walk into a restaurant where everyone has just finished a massive meal and drank a gallon of water, you couldn't sell a glass of water for a penny, no matter how pure or crisp it is.
Right, they don't need it.
But if you take that exact same glass of water into the middle of the Sahara Desert to people who have been walking for 2 days, you can name your price. The product didn't change at all. The starvation of the market changed.
That is a perfect metaphor. Finding a starving crowd, a group of people who are already desperate for a solution, who are already in pain or in need, is the only thing that guarantees success. The product comes second.
It's all about the audience.
If the crowd is starving enough, they will gladly buy a mediocre hamburger. But if the crowd isn't hungry, the greatest hamburger in the world is just going to rot on the counter.
But that raises a massive problem, right? Finding that starving crowd sounds great in theory, but as Gary points out, humans are incredibly complex, and frankly, we are terrible at telling people what we actually want.
Oh, we are notoriously unreliable narrators of our own desires. And this is a critical lesson in human psychology that every listener needs to internalize. To find a starving crowd, you have to observe what people do, not what they say.
Gary gives this hilarious, eye-opening example of a beer survey from back in the day. A major brewery surveyed thousands of consumers to find out what kind of beer they preferred. They wanted to know where to focus their advertising.
Right.
And roughly 80% of the respondents confidently claimed that they preferred premium, expensive beer over regular, cheap beer. The brewery executives were completely astonished by this data. Why? Because their actual hard sales figures proved that the vast majority of people were buying the cheaper, regular beer.
It's the classic psychological divide between stated preference and revealed preference.
He gives an even more extreme example that I think illustrates this perfectly. Think about the National Enquirer, the notorious supermarket tabloid.
Oh, yeah.
Almost everyone you ask will put it down. They'll roll their eyes, call it trash, say it's terrible for society, and swear they never, ever read it. And yet, at the time Gary is writing, the National Enquirer was the largest selling newspaper in the world by a massive margin. It was a total juggernaut.
Now contrast that with the Bible.
Right. If you poll people on their favorite book or what they read most often, millions upon millions will say the Bible. They own one, they display it prominently in their homes, they swear on it in court.
Sure.
But Gary notes the brutal statistical truth in any given week. Exponentially more people actually sat down and read the National Enquirer than had read the Bible.
It's amazing.
So I have to ask you, looking at this from a psychological perspective, are people just natural liars? Are we inherently deceitful when someone hands us a survey or asks us a question about our habits?
It's a great question, but it's crucial to understand that it is rarely malicious deceit. What we are seeing here is social desirability bias.
Okay, social desirability bias.
Yeah. Human beings are deeply tribal, socially driven creatures. We constantly monitor how we are perceived by the tribe. When someone asks us a question, our brain instantly calculates the most socially acceptable, high-status answer. We want to project an idealized version of ourselves to the surveyor, and often we're trying to project that idealized version to ourselves.
We answer based on the person we think we should be, the sophisticated, educated person who drinks premium craft beer, reads ancient scripture, and contemplates philosophy. Not the exhausted, stressed-out person who just wants a cheap light beer and to read gossip about a movie star's divorce to feel better about their own messy life.
Exactly. We live in the tension between our aspirational self, which is system 2 thinking, logical and forward-looking, and our primal self, which is system 1 thinking, seeking immediate gratification and dopamine. As an entrepreneur, a marketer, or even just someone trying to understand a spouse or a friend, if you build your worldview based entirely on what people say they want, you will be constantly frustrated. And in business, you will go broke.
Yeah, you can't just take their word for it.
You have to become a student of reality. You have to track behavior. Truth is determined by how people use their time and their wallets, not their mouths.
Think about your own Netflix queue right now, You probably have 5 critically acclaimed 3-hour historical documentaries sitting in your watch list that you've been telling yourself you're going to watch for 6 months.
That's your aspirational self.
Right. But what happens on a Tuesday night when you're tired from work? You binge 4 episodes of a trashy reality dating show.
The revealed preference wins every time.
So if surveys are practically useless, and if we can't trust a single word that comes out of a consumer's mouth about their desires, how do we scientifically track that revealed preference? If everyone is hiding their true behavior, how do we find the starving crowd? I mean, you can't just guess.
No, you need a tracking mechanism that completely ignores words and only measures financial transactions. In Gary's era, that ultimate weapon was something called the SRDS list book.
Yes, the standard rate and data service directory. I really want to paint a picture of what this actually was, because today we are so used to digital algorithms doing the heavy lifting for us.
Right. It's all automated now.
But in 1984, the SRDS was this massive, physical, incredibly heavy book filled with thousands of pages of tiny, dense print. It was a directory of every single direct mail list available for rent in the United States. Gary was absolutely obsessed with this thing. He tells Bond to spend hours just sitting in his cell, reading through this massive directory of lists.
To a layman, it just looked like a phone book. To Gary, it was an X-ray machine that showed exactly where money was flowing in the American economy.
To illustrate how to decode the crowd, Gary walks Bond through a hierarchy of prospects. He starts from the absolute worst way to find customers and works his way up to the ultimate goldmine. And this progression is an absolute masterclass in targeting.
It really is. But it requires us to understand the friction of direct mail. Every letter you send costs money, right? Postage, printing, paper. If you mail the wrong people, you bleed cash instantly.
Okay, so possibility number 1 is mailing a sales pitch to names picked randomly out of a phone book. Gary says this is terrible. You're shooting wildly into the dark. You have people with no disposable income, people who can't read, people who have never bought anything by mail and don't trust the post office. It's a massive waste of resources.
So you try to get smarter. You move to possibility number 2, the phone book, but you filter it. You only target high-income zip codes. It's slightly better, but you still have a massive problem.
What's that?
You have wealthy people, sure, but you have no idea if they're interested in your specific product or if they are the type of people who simply refuse to buy things through the mail.
Right. So then possibility number 3, you get more specific. You mail to specific high-income professions. You rent a list of doctors, lawyers, or architects. Better, but you are still just guessing that a doctor actually wants what you're selling.
Possibility number 4 is where the psychology shifts and we start getting warm. You find a list of wealthy people who are proven mail order buyers.
Okay, proven buyers?
Yes. In the direct marketing world, a person who has bought anything by mail is exponentially more valuable than someone who hasn't. Why? Because they have already crossed the psychological threshold of trusting the medium. They trust the process of sending money away and waiting for a package.
But Gary keeps refining it. He's looking for the purest concentration of desire. So possibility number 5, wealthy people who bought a product similar to yours by mail.
Getting hotter.
Possibility number 6, wealthy people who bought a similar product several times.
Even better.
Possibility number 7, wealthy people who bought a similar product several times and paid big money for it.
And hidden within this hierarchy is the foundational formula of all direct response marketing RFM: recency, frequency, and monetary value, or unit of sale.
I really want to break down the psychology of RFM because this isn't just a business acronym. It's practically a map of human neurology. Let's start with recency.
Recency measures how recently a customer made a purchase. Someone who bought a product yesterday is a much hotter prospect than someone who bought the same product 3 years ago.
Makes sense.
When someone makes a purchase, especially a high-value one, their brain is flooded with dopamine. They're in a state of heightened excitement, exploring a new interest. They're in a buying trance. If you can reach them while they are still in that state, they are highly likely to buy complementary products. If you wait 3 years, the dopamine has faded, the interest has waned, and the trance is broken.
That explains why the moment you buy, like, a guitar online, you are suddenly bombarded with ads for guitar pedals, amplifiers, and sheet music.
Exactly. Then there is frequency. How often do they buy? If someone buys a book on real estate investing once, they might just be curious. But if they buy a new book on real estate investing every single month, they have a ravenous hunger. They have carved a behavioral groove in their life. That is a starving crowd.
And finally, monetary value, or unit of sale. This is about capacity and wealth signaling. Someone who drops $5,000 on a product has a fundamentally different relationship with money than someone who agonizes over a $10 purchase.
Right.
So when Gary is scouring that massive SRDS book, he is looking for lists that score high on all three: high recency, high frequency, and high unit of sale.
He actually stumbled across a perfect example of this while writing one of the letters to Bond. He was flipping through the SRDS directory and found a list categorized under investors. It was a list called Diamond and Ruby Buyers.
Diamond and Ruby Buyers.
Yeah, and the description in the book noted that this was a list of nearly 4,000 individuals who had recently purchased diamonds and rubies through the mail, and the average unit of sale was $5,000.
Gary literally stops his typewriter to do the math for his son. 4,000 proven buyers times an average spend of $5,000. That is a $20 million market sitting on one single obscure list.
That is the ultimate definition of a starving crowd with incredibly deep pockets. If you have a high-end investment product, a wealth protection strategy, or a luxury good, that is exactly who you want to talk to.
Absolutely.
But Gary is a perfectionist. He tells Bond that even this $20 million list isn't the absolute best, the ultimate list, the pinnacle of the hierarchy possibility. Number 10 is your own list of satisfied customers.
Of course, because you don't have to overcome the barrier of trust. They already know you, they already like you, and they've already experienced the value you provide.
Nothing will ever convert higher than people who have already given you money and had a positive experience.
Here's where this gets really interesting when we apply it to the modern world. Bond's commentary on this section is mind-blowing. Gary's process of identifying a hyper-specific list allowed him to do something incredibly powerful: customization.
Yes.
Gary gives an example of creating a generic report on real estate investing. But instead of putting a boring title on it, he targets a specific list from the SRDS, let's say, a list of chiropractors in Los Angeles. He changes the headline to "How LA Chiropractors Can Buy Real Estate with No Money Down." The core information in the report is exactly the same, but the wrapper is hyper-customized to the reader's exact identity.
It creates an instant feeling of, wow, this was made specifically for me. And Bond points out that in the digital age, this level of hyper-customization is essentially free and automated.
Right, back then it was so expensive.
Back in Gary's day, changing a headline for a print run cost extra money for typesetting and new plates. Today, with digital advertising, you can set up 50 different landing pages for free. You can have one page targeting nurses, another targeting mechanics, another targeting teachers in Ohio, all leading to the exact same core product.
It takes that random shotgun approach of the phone book and turns it into a laser-guided system. But here is the brutal reality that Gary understood better than anyone, and it's the obstacle where most people fail.
The sorting process.
Yes. You can have the best product in the world. You can find the most desperately starving crowd. You can rent the perfect list of recent, frequent, high-dollar buyers. But if your message is delivered in the wrong wrapper, it goes straight into the trash can without a single word ever being read.
You have to survive the gauntlet of the sorting process. And this brings us to Gary's brilliant observation about the psychology of the mailbox, the concept of the A pile versus the B pile.
I think about this every single day now when I get my mail. Gary argues that every single day when a human being walks to their physical mailbox, pulls out a stack of envelopes, and walks back into their house, they immediately, unconsciously, sort that mail into two distinct piles.
It is an automatic sorting algorithm in the human brain. The A pile is personal mail. It looks like it's from a friend, a relative, or a personal business associate. The B pile is commercial mail. It looks like an advertisement, a bill, a charity solicitation, or just corporate junk.
And the behavioral rule tied to the sorting is absolute. The A pile always gets opened. Everyone wants to read their personal mail. We crave connection. The B pile, it gets tossed aside. Maybe it gets opened later if the person is incredibly bored, but most of the time it goes straight into the recycling bin, completely unopened.
Which means your primary directive as a marketer or communicator isn't just to write good, persuasive copy. Your very first job is to ensure your envelope survives that ruthless sorting process and lands safely in the A pile.
Gary breaks down exactly what triggers the brain's B-pile defense mechanism. The brain is looking for specific visual cues that signal, hey, this is a salesman trying to take my resources.
Right.
If an envelope has a bulk rate postage permit printed on it instead of a real lickable stamp B-pile, if it has a shiny, peeling computer label for the address instead of being typed or handwritten B-pile, if the return address features a massive, colorful corporate logo B-pile.
And the absolute worst offender, the thing that guarantees instant death in the sorting process, teaser copy printed on the outside of the envelope.
Yes. Things like urgent, exciting news inside, or you may have already won, or open immediately for a special offer.
When the brain sees those phrases, the amygdala, the threat detection center we talked about earlier, it flashes a warning. It screams, I am trying to sell you something. The recipient's defenses go up instantly.
Game over.
Gary says you have to do the exact opposite. You must camouflage your message. You have to make the envelope look like a personal letter from a peer. Use a live first-class postage stamp. You type or handwrite the address directly onto the envelope itself. Use a plain, blind return address with just a street name and city, no corporate name whatsoever.
Now, I have to stop and challenge this because it feels so counterintuitive to modern business logic. Companies spend millions of dollars on branding, graphic design, and making their materials look as polished and premium as possible. Isn't it a bad idea to make your communication look less professional? Won't people think you're amateurish?
It only seems counterintuitive until you understand the ultimate goal. The goal is not to look unprofessional. The goal is to appear non-commercial. The recipient should look at the envelope, see a typed address and a real stamp, and think, who is this from? I need to open this to find out. You are leveraging human curiosity rather than trying to overpower them with branding.
The ultimate proof of this concept is Gary's famous coat of arms letter. He tells this incredible high-stakes story to Bond. Gary had a business selling a report on family name histories, which included an illustration of the family's historical coat of arms. After some initial success, he wanted to scale up and expand the product line.
So he went big.
He went massive. He hired designers, went off into the woods to focus, spent an absolute fortune, and designed this beautiful, full-color, glossy catalog featuring 70 different heraldry items. Swords, shields, plaques. It looked incredibly professional, like something you'd get from a high-end luxury retailer.
It was a beautiful piece of commercial art, and it completely bombed. It didn't even make back the cost of the postage.
He was devastated. So he tried to iterate. He created a smaller, cheaper 3-item brochure. It still barely broke even. He was on the verge of giving up. Finally, out of desperation, he stripped away all the professional gloss, all the expensive graphic design. He went back to the raw psychology of the A-pile.
He went simple.
He wrote a simple, personal-looking letter on plain paper. He enclosed a single, standard snapshot photograph of the wood-carved product. The letter didn't have a massive headline. It just started with a simple sentence. I thought you might like to see what the noble coat of arms looks like in full color, so I am sending you the enclosed snapshot.
It looked exactly like something an old college friend or an eccentric uncle would send you in the mail. It triggered 0 commercial alarms.
And that simple, non-commercial, deeply personal approach generated $40 million in sales. $40 million in the 1980s. All because he stopped looking like a desperate salesman and started looking like a personal connection.
It is a stunning validation of the psychology. And Bond's modern update to this is so incredibly spot on for anyone navigating the digital landscape today. Bond says it is better to be in the spam box of a prospect's primary email address than in the primary inbox of their spam email address.
That is such a profound insight into modern digital behavior.
Yeah.
Think about how you filter your own digital life. We do the exact same A pile, B pile sorting with our email. Almost everyone has that one junk email address, the one they use to sign up for 10% discount codes, newsletters, and free Wi-Fi airports.
Oh, absolutely. That inbox is the ultimate B pile. It'd have 40,000 unread messages, and we never, ever look at it.
Never.
But our primary email, the one we use for work, for our bank accounts, for our family, that is our A pile. We check that obsessively multiple times a day. Even if an email accidentally lands in the spam folder of our primary account, we still meticulously scan the subject lines of that spam folder just to make sure we didn't miss something important. So your goal isn't just to get an email address, it's to build enough trust to get their real APILE email address.
Exactly. The medium changes from paper envelopes to digital inboxes, but the underlying psychology of the human sorting mechanism never changes. You must bypass the commercial defense systems.
So let's assume you've done it. You've successfully infiltrated the APILE. The prospect is curious. They tear open the envelope. Now what? They're still busy, they're still distracted, and the moment they realize it's a letter from someone they don't know, their finger is hovering over the trash can. The very first thing they see has to jolt them awake.
This brings us to the actual architecture of the pitch, and Gary's use of the classic ADA formula, starting with the concept of the grabber.
ADA is one of the oldest, most reliable, and most brutally effective formulas in the history of persuasion. It stands for attention, interest, desire, action. It's a linear progression. You cannot skip steps.
You can't ask for the sale too early.
Right. You can't ask a prospect to take action before you've built burning desire. You can't build desire if you haven't cultivated their interest. But before anything else can happen, you have to seize their attention.
And Gary was an absolute master at this. He didn't just rely on bold headlines or clever wordplay to get attention. He was famous for physically attaching bizarre objects to the top of his sales letters to act as physical grabbers. He would staple a real $1 bill to the page, or a Japanese penny, or a Mexican peso.
Oh, dirt.
Yes. In one of the most famous examples he gives Bond, he talks about attaching a small, clear plastic baggie filled with literal dirt to the top of a letter.
Imagine the sensory experience of that. You open a personal-looking envelope expecting a letter from a friend, and you pull out a piece of paper with a bag of dirt stapled to it. Your brain experiences a massive pattern interrupt. Your routine is shattered. Your focused attention is immediately, involuntarily captured. You are holding this thing thinking, what on earth is this, and why did a stranger send it to my house?
But this raises a major psychological red flag for me. If you shock someone like that, how do you transition into a sales pitch without the reader feeling manipulated or tricked? Because if I open a letter, get confused by a bag of dirt, and then the first line of the letter says, now that I have your attention, buy my new vacuum cleaner, I'm not just going to throw the letter away, I'm going to be furious. I will actively hate your brand.
And you have every right to be furious. Your brain realizes it has been hijacked under false pretenses. Gary is incredibly strict about this absolute rule: the grabber must be relevant. It must tie seamlessly, logically, and immediately into the core message of the letter.
Okay, so give me an example of what not to do.
He gives an example of a terrible cheating grabber, a giant headline that reads, "A flying submarine," followed by copy that says, "No, we don't have a flying submarine, but we do have these great pink diet pills." That breeds instant resentment. You've broken the reader's trust in the first 5 seconds.
So how does he tie the dirt into the pitch without breaking trust?
In Gary's classic example, the letter starts immediately by addressing the confusion. It says, I attached this baggie to the top of this letter for 2 reasons. First, I needed your attention. Second, what is inside this baggie is a tiny amount of the most valuable, highly sought-after commodity on Earth, Hawaiian real estate. The sand in this baggie was taken directly from a pristine beach in Maui, and I am writing to you today because you have a rare, fleeting opportunity to own a piece of it.
It's incredibly elegant. The transition from the shock of the grabber, the attention, to the explanation, the interest, is perfectly smooth. It justifies the gimmick instantly. Bond actually shares his own brilliant, modern iteration of this technique.
A dinar, right.
Yeah. Bond wanted to sell a foreign exchange, a forex trading system. So he took a crisp, real Iraqi dinar, physically attached it to the top of his letters, and mailed it out. The opening copy read, I attached this crisp Iraqi dinar to get your attention, but also to prove a vital economic point. This currency you are holding is practically worthless. It was destroyed by the poor fiscal decisions made by the government that printed it. If you are at all worried that our own government is making decisions that will similarly devalue the US dollar, you need to read every word of this letter.
It's a masterpiece of physical metaphor. It takes a complex, abstract, potentially boring financial concept, currency devaluation, and puts a physical manifestation of that fear directly into the prospect's hands.
Okay, so you have their attention, and you've transitioned smoothly into interest. But Gary emphasizes that keeping their interest isn't just about the words you use, it's about the visual experience of reading. He introduces this concept of eye relief.
Yes. The visual layout of text communicates to the brain how difficult a task will be before the conscious mind processes a single word. Have you ever clicked on a website or opened a textbook and seen a massive solid wall of tiny text stretching from margin to margin with no breaks?
Instantly exhausted, my brain just says, nope, too much work, and I click away.
Exactly. Cognitive overload. Gary says your copy should look like an inviting eye treat. He prescribes very specific formatting rules to create this eye relief. You use incredibly wide margins so the eye doesn't have to travel far side to side. You use double spacing between paragraphs. You use very short paragraphs, sometimes just a single sentence, or even a single word on its own line.
I noticed he also loved using parentheses.
Yes, he loved using parentheses to break up the visual flow and add little conversational whispered asides to the reader. He wanted the reading experience to feel effortless, almost like the reader has stepped onto a slippery slide and physically cannot stop sliding down the page.
And he had a very specific target for what the overall look of an advertisement should be. He didn't want it to look like a glossy corporate brochure, and he didn't want it to look like a standard advertisement. He wanted it to look like an editorial rave review.
He tells Bond to imagine a scenario. A tough, skeptical reporter at the LA Times reads your book, falls completely in love with it, and writes a massive full-page news article about how amazing your work is, and then the newspaper editor adds a little box at the bottom with instructions on how to order it. That's what your ad should look like and feel like. An exciting, organic news flash from a trusted source.
Which is fascinating, because if we pull that concept out of 1984 and drop it into today, that is the exact blueprint for native advertising on social media. The most successful ads on platforms like TikTok or Instagram don't look like highly produced television commercials. They look like organic, user-generated content shot on an iPhone.
Right, they just look like a regular post.
Exactly. They blend seamlessly into the editorial feed of the platform. It's just a creator giving a rave review of a product to their followers.
The underlying principle is identical. You are trying to bypass the consumer's commercial radar. Gary summarizes this philosophy beautifully. The best writing goes unnoticed. If someone finishes reading your copy and says, wow, this is a brilliantly written advertisement, the prose is magnificent, you have completely failed.
You don't want them thinking about the writing.
No, you don't want them to admire your wordplay. You want them to praise the product and desperately reach for their wallet. If you are writing for applause, you will go home with empty pockets. You write for money.
That is such a stark, honest distillation of the craft. So we've covered attention and interest. We have bypassed their defenses. We have an easy-to-read editorial look. But moving the prospect through desire and finally forcing action requires more than a smooth writing. It requires a fundamentally irresistible offer. And this brings us to the underlying architecture of the deal itself and the psychology of the reason why.
This is a crucial transition. This is where we move from the art of writing copy to the science of constructing the proposition. The deal itself must overcome a massive psychological hurdle. Cognitive dissonance.
Explain how that applies here. Because Gary says that standard propositions are things like buy one, get one free, or massive 50% discount today. But he warns that if you offer a really spectacular deal without context, people don't get excited, they get skeptical.
Because it triggers the brain's threat detection system again. When humans see an amazing deal that seems too good to be true, our cognitive dissonance alarms go off. We think, what is the catch? Why are they giving this away? Is it broken? Is it a scam? If you do not provide a believable, logical explanation for why the deal exists, the prospect will invent a negative reason in their own head and they will not buy. You must provide the reason why.
Standard reasons work fine. We're going out of business, or our warehouse had a flood, so it's a fire sale, or we need to clear out last year's inventory. Those satisfy the logical brain. But Gary reveals what he considers the most powerful, compelling reason why you could ever use, and it bypasses logic and taps directly into human ego.
The ultimate reason why is I am offering you this incredible deal because you, by virtue of some highly unique circumstance, are incredibly special.
It is brilliant because it flatters the prospect's ego while simultaneously justifying the steep discount. It makes them feel like an insider.
He gives a masterful example of how he used this exact psychological lever in the coat of arms business we talked about earlier. He would send a letter to a prospect and say, we had to manufacture a physical sample of the Smith family crest to use in a professional photography shoot for our upcoming national catalog. Now that the PR campaign is over, we have this beautiful hand-carved Smith plaque just sitting in our office gathering dust. Obviously, we can't sell a Smith plaque to anyone named Jones or Williams or Davis. It is totally worthless to them. It's only valuable to a Smith. So because your name happens to be Smith, and because we want it out of our office, We are offering you this specific, one-of-a-kind plaque at a massive discount.
It is flawless logic. It makes complete sense to the buyer. It explains the discount perfectly without devaluing the product, and it makes the buyer feel like they have stumbled into a rare, exclusive opportunity that no one else on earth has access to. That specific application of the reason why is what drove that promotion to $40 million in sales. It built the desire, and it forced the action because there was only one plaque available.
So, Gary is giving 16-year-old Bond all of these incredibly high-level psychological concepts. But the way he tells Bond to actually learn and master them is where things get really intense. He doesn't just say, read a few marketing books and think about these concepts. He demands a grueling process of physical imprinting.
This is one of the most demanding and, frankly, unpopular disciplines Gary teaches in the entire collection. And it's probably why so few people ever reach his level of mastery. He tells Bond to go out and collect copies of proven, multi-million-dollar winning ads like the famous Tova facelift ad or classic Wall Street Journal sales letters. And then he tells his son to sit down with a pen and paper and copy the entire ad out by hand, word for word, punctuation mark for punctuation mark, over and over again.
I know exactly what you were going to say.
I am going to say what everyone is thinking, isn't that just mind-numbing busy work? It sounds like being punished in elementary school and being forced to write lines on a chalkboard. How does mindlessly copying someone else's words teach you how to write original material?
It sounds like punishment, but the neurobiology behind this practice is incredibly sound. Gary is trying to force cellular knowledge into his son's nervous system. When you simply read a great piece of writing, you process it superficially. You understand the gist of it. But when you physically write it out by hand, you are engaging entirely different motor and cognitive pathways.
You are literally slowing your brain down to match the speed of your hand.
Exactly. And in doing so, you are forced to process the mechanics of the writing. You physically feel the rhythm of the sentences. You internalize how the author builds curiosity in the opening, how they transition smoothly into the benefits, how they deploy the reason why, and how they structure the urgency of the call to action. By writing it out, you are myelinating the neural pathways associated with persuasive rhythm.
Gary uses a stunning analogy to explain the depth of understanding he wants Bond to achieve. He talks about the author Alex Haley, who wrote the monumental historical novel Roots. Haley wanted to write about the horrific, unimaginable experience of his ancestors crossing the ocean in the bowels of slave ships. But he didn't just read historical accounts or look at diagrams.
No, he went all in.
Haley actually booked passage on a rusty, miserable freighter, and he spent the voyage down in the dark, damp hold of the ship, enduring the sickness and the misery so he could physically imprint the feeling of that environment into his own nervous system. By the time he sat down to write the book, he didn't just have an intellectual understanding of the subject, he had a cellular, emotional understanding of it.
That is the level of mastery Gary is demanding. He wants Bond to have a deep, internal, nervous system level understanding of what persuasion feels like. It's about building muscle memory for success. You aren't just learning to write, you are absorbing the cadence of a master.
And the final polish on this exhaustive process is reading your own copy out loud. Gary tells Bond that advertising writing needs to be the smoothest, most effortless writing of all. He says, when you finish a draft, read it out loud. If you stumble over a sentence, or if you have to catch your breath, or if a phrase sounds clunky or unnatural to your ear, the reader is going to stumble too. And when a reader stumbles, the spell is broken, the buying trance shatters, and they stop reading. You rewrite it and read it out loud again until it flows perfectly off the tongue.
It is a rigorous, unrelenting standard of excellence. But what becomes very clear as you reach the final letters in the collection is that knowing all of these tactics, the RFM lists, the A-pile envelopes, the grabbers, the physical imprinting, absolutely none of it matters if you allow your own psychology and the people around you to sabotage your journey.
Which brings us to a fascinating shift in the letters. As we approach the end of the collection, the direct marketing lessons start to take a backseat. And Gary focuses heavily on the psychology of the entrepreneur. He focuses on mental survival. And this isn't just about surviving a federal prison camp. It's about surviving the lonely, often hostile path of trying to achieve extraordinary success in life.
If we pull back and look at the bigger picture, Gary understands a fundamental truth about human ambition. The path to wealth or mastery or any kind of outlier success is inherently lonely. And the greatest resistance you will face won't come from your competitors. It will come from the people closest to you.
He gives Bond a very stark warning about the naysayers. He says, if you decide to go out and make a fortune or start a business or change your life, do not expect your friends and family to throw a parade for you. In fact, expect them to actively try and talk you out of it.
Bond expands on this perfectly in his modern commentary. He notes that when you tell average people you have a grand plan to get rich or do something unconventional, they will instantly transform into experts on why it will fail. They will immediately list all the insurmountable obstacles. And the fascinating part is, it's not necessarily because they are evil or malicious or want you to suffer. It is a subconscious psychological defense mechanism.
Bond uses a great example. Imagine you live in a small town, and you tell your friends you are going to open a biodiesel station. The moment you mention it, people will say, oh, the environmental regulations are too tough, or commercial property is way too expensive right now, or nobody drives those cars, it'll never work. Why is their immediate reflex to shoot the idea down?
Because the idea of you achieving extraordinary success forces them to confront their own complacency. We are tribal creatures, and most people judge their own status and success by comparing themselves to their immediate peers. If you, their peer, someone from their exact background, suddenly become a multimillionaire or achieve a massive dream, it invalidates all of their excuses for why they haven't achieved their own dream.
It's a mirror they don't want to look into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your success shines a harsh spotlight on their failure to act. So it is psychologically much easier for them to try and pull you back down into the bucket with them than to applaud your climb and face their own shortcomings.
It is the absolute definition of the crab bucket mentality. You put one crab in a bucket, it can climb out, you put a dozen in, and the moment one reaches the rim, the others will reach up and pull it back down. Gary's solution to this crab bucket dynamic is brutal, but he argues it is necessary for survival. First, he says keep your goals completely to yourself. He literally tells Bond, don't tell anyone you're fasting. Just do the work quietly in the dark. Prove your ambition with results, not with arguments.
And second, he advocates for ruthlessly pruning negative people from your life. He views a personal support system like a garden. You have to constantly be on the lookout for weeds, and when you see them, you have to pull them out by the root. If someone does not actively add to your momentum, your clarity, and your well-being, you must marginalize them or remove them entirely from your circle.
I read that and thought, wow, that is incredibly hard to do when the weeds are your family members or your oldest childhood friends. But Gary did not compromise on this principle. He actually marginalized his own father when his father refused to believe in his success and constantly projected negativity. But I want to ask you, how does a listener actually apply this survival mentality today without becoming deeply paranoid, alienated, or completely isolated from society?
It's not about paranoia. It's about cultivating profound self-awareness and absolute emotional control. You have to guard your reactions. Bond shares a critical rule his father taught him for navigating these emotional minefields, the 72-hour rule.
Oh, this is a good one.
If you are ever in a highly emotional state, whether you are blindingly angry, totally devastated, or even wildly euphoric, you must wait 3 full days before making any major life decision. You wait 72 hours before you quit your job, before you sue a business partner, or before you end a relationship. You let the HALT states pass, you let the amygdala calm down, and you let the logical prefrontal cortex come back online.
Gary actually gives a breathtaking real-time example of this emotional control from inside the prison, and it's one of the most memorable stories in the letters. He is in the prison chow hall, and he gets into a petty dispute with another inmate over a cup of ice. The inmate gets aggressive and challenges Gary to go behind the dorms and fight to settle it. Now, Gary notes in the letter that this guy is a rodent, he's small, he's not particularly smart, and Gary is highly confident he could physically destroy him. Gary's ego, his pride, and his adrenaline are all screaming at him to go behind the dorms, fight this guy, and prove his dominance to the rest of the yard.
But Gary stops. In that fraction of a second, he runs the logical calculus. He realizes that if he fights, even if he wins easily, the guards will get involved. He will be put in chains, he will likely be transferred to a higher security, more dangerous facility, and he will lose 6 months of his good time credit, extending his prison sentence. He realizes the absolute absurdity of trading 6 months of his freedom for a moment of ego over a cup of ice. So he swallows his pride, glares at the guy, and walks away.
He recognized that his ego was about to cost him half a year of his life. And he is remarkably honest in the letter about how much it hurt his pride, how much he absolutely hated having to walk away and look like he was backing down. But here's the genius of Gary Halbert. He doesn't just walk away and stew in anger. He analyzes why the confrontation happened in the first place. He realizes he was off. He was tired. He had been fasting. He was missing his girlfriend. He was radiating vulnerability. And that vulnerability, that defensive posture, is what invited the aggressive action from the other inmate.
Exactly. The ultimate lesson he took from that incident wasn't just don't get into fistfights. The deeper lesson was, I failed to manage my state. I need to retreat, fast, pump iron, or read and rebuild my mental and physical armor so I don't project the subtle weakness that invites these confrontations. In life, in business, and in relationships, you must remain acutely aware of your own state. You have to be ready to strike when opportunity knocks, and you must have the discipline to quietly retreat and rebuild when you know you are compromised.
This brings us perfectly to the ultimate synthesis of what the Boron Letters really are. When you step back and strip away all the 1980s direct mail tactics, when you look past the SRDS list books, the postage stamps, and the baggies of dirt, what Gary Halbert is really teaching his 16-year-old son is a cohesive philosophy of relentless reality.
He is teaching that extraordinary success is not about finding a magic, flawless product. And it certainly isn't about employing a sneaky copywriting trick to manipulate people. Success is about a disciplined, almost uncomfortable dedication to observing the world exactly as it is, not as you wish it were. It is about watching what people actually do and spend their money on, rather than listening to what they claim to care about. It is about treating your prospect with profound personal respect, sending them an A-pile letter that speaks to them as an individual, rather than bombarding them with commercial junk.
It is about communicating clearly, effortlessly, and honestly. And above all else, it is about maintaining absolute self-reliance. It is about building the physical stamina and the mental toughness required to withstand the naysayers, to walk away from ego-driven battles that don't serve your ultimate goal, and to keep putting one foot in front of the other even when you are literally trapped in a federal prison camp, stripped of everything but your mind.
As you, the listener, process all of these concepts, I would challenge you to take Gary's concept of the A pile and the B pile and apply it far beyond just your physical mailbox or your email inbox. Apply it to the architecture of your entire life.
Think about your daily habits. Think about the media you consume. Think about the conversations you engage in on a daily basis. Think about the people you surround yourself with.
How many of the activities filling your day are essentially B-pile distractions? How much of your energy is being drained by B-pile habits? How many of the people in your ear are naysaying weeds who pull you back into the crab bucket?
And if you were to apply Gary Halbert's ruthless editing to your own life, if you had the courage to clear out the B-pile relationships, the B-pile habits, the B-pile emotional reactions like anger and ego, what would happen? What would your life look like? And what could you achieve if you focused your energy entirely and exclusively on the A-pile truths?
It is a profound, slightly intimidating question to sit with, but it is the necessary first step to building that armor.
We started this deep dive talking about a masterclass originating from the unlikeliest of places of federal prison camp. But perhaps it is only when a person is stripped of every luxury, every excuse, and every polite distraction, forced to look at the raw, unforgiving reality of human nature, that the ultimate truths about persuasion, resilience, and survival become crystal clear. Keep observing what people actually do, protect your mental energy, and as always, keep diving deep. What if the very actions you take to, play it safe and avoid conflict are actually painting a giant glowing bullseye on your back?
I mean, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? We're conditioned from a really young age to believe that keeping our heads down is the way to go.
Right, like just be accommodating, don't ruffle any feathers.
Exactly. We think that's the ultimate survival strategy.
Yeah.
But whether you're navigating the harsh realities of a federal prison yard or just a cutthroat corporate boardroom, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Projecting vulnerability in the name of playing it safe is actually the absolute fastest way to invite disaster.
Wow. Well, welcome to this deep dive into Chapter 4 of Gary Halbert's The Boron Letters.
So glad to be digging into this one today.
Yeah, if you've been following along with us, you know these letters are basically a masterclass in copywriting, marketing, and human psychology.
Written by one of the greatest marketing minds ever, really.
Totally. But they were written from this highly unusual, highly pressurized environment, which is the Boron federal prison camp.
Yeah. And that's exactly why the insights in this specific chapter are just so razor sharp. I mean, prison strips away the polite veneer of society.
Right, all the pleasantries are just gone.
Exactly. It leaves you with the raw, underlying behavioral economics of human interaction.
So today, we're going to unpack the unfiltered psychology of projecting strength.
Right. And we'll explore how to cultivate absolute, uncompromising self-reliance.
Because, these primal survival tactics form the unbreakable foundation of literally any successful business or entrepreneurial venture.
They really do. You can't survive without them.
Let's get right into the text then, because Chapter 4 opens with this really fascinating juxtaposition.
It's a great opening.
Yeah. Gary has just turned 46, and he starts this letter to his son, Bond, by talking about a visit he got at the prison camp.
Right, his family actually made the trip up to Boron.
Yeah, and they brought him a birthday cake. And he writes about this with such, I don't know, genuine, grounded appreciation.
It really is a striking image to start a lesson on toughness, isn't it?
It totally is.
You have a man in a federal penitentiary dealing with the immense psychological weight of incarceration.
The isolation, the loss of autonomy, all of that.
Yeah, and yet he takes a moment to anchor himself to this very simple, very human gesture.
He explicitly notes how good it is to know that his family is on his side.
And he also mentions his appreciation for a friend he made on the inside, an inmate named Jock, who's about to be transferred.
Right, so it sets up this incredible duality that runs through the whole chapter.
It really does. On one hand, he's establishing the sheer power, the absolute necessity, really, of having a solid support system.
But then he immediately balances that with the ruthless necessity of pruning the weeds out of your life.
We really need to look at the psychology of that birthday cake for a second.
Yeah, let's do that. Because it's not just dessert.
No, exactly. It isn't just a dessert. In an environment that's designed to isolate you and break down your individual identity, that cake is a psychological tether.
It's like proof of reality.
Right. It's physical, undeniable proof that he's not entirely cut off. He has a perimeter of trust.
And in business, just like in life, that internal perimeter is vital.
Absolutely vital. It's your baseline of sanity when the market gets chaotic.
But as the commentary provided by his son, Bond, reveals, securing that perimeter means you have to be highly discerning.
Very discerning about who gets to stand inside it.
And this is where the story gets deeply personal and, well, quite heavy, actually.
Yeah, Bond shares this anecdote in the commentary about Gary's own father.
Right. Now, societally, we're hardwired to think of our parents as our ultimate support system.
They're supposed to be the bedrock.
Exactly. But Gary's dad constantly, relentlessly doubted him.
It's tough to read. He insisted that Gary was crazy for trying to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, he kept telling him he would never break out of that average working Joe existence.
It's a tragic dynamic, but honestly, it is an incredibly common one.
Really? You think it's that common?
Oh, absolutely. The text points out that this doubt wasn't just a passing comment. It was deeply entrenched in the father's worldview.
Right.
And the psychology behind this is critical to understand. Often, the people closest to you are the ones most threatened by your ambition.
Wait, threatened? Even his own father?
Especially his own father. Think about the cognitive dissonance involved here.
Okay, walk me through that.
Well, if you spent 40 years breaking your back in a safe, average, unfulfilling job because you convinced yourself that, this is just how the world works.
Right, you've accepted your lot in life.
Exactly. You have built your entire identity around that sacrifice.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Then your son comes along and says, actually, the world doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I'm going to write words on a page and make millions.
Oh, wow. So if the son succeeds...
Exactly. If your son succeeds, it forces you to face a terrifying reality.
That maybe your 40 years of sacrifice weren't necessary?
Precisely. Maybe you could have done more.
That is a harsh mirror to look into.
It is. So unconsciously, people will try to pull you back down to their level simply to protect their own ego and their own life choices.
Wow. That makes the continuation of Bond's story even more painful, I think.
But also triumphant.
Yeah, true, because Gary did succeed. He became incredibly wealthy.
He bought a beautiful, sprawling custom home in the best part of town.
He built a massive, highly profitable publishing and marketing business.
And despite all of that, his father still wouldn't believe it.
That denial was just that strong.
It really was. The reality of Gary's success was so incompatible with the father's internal narrative that his brain it simply rejected the evidence.
Bond writes that Gary literally had to physically drag mail bags.
Oh, this part is crazy.
Actual physical U.S. Postal Service mail bags full of checks from customers and dump them in front of his dad before the man would even begin to accept that the business was real.
Imagine the psychological toll it takes on a person.
Right. You are building an empire, and you have to exert energy dragging mail bags to your father just to prove you aren't a liar.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
So how did Gary handle this? Because I'm wondering, did he blow up at his dad, cut him off in some dramatic screaming match?
No, he didn't. And the way Gary handles this is the crucial takeaway for anyone dealing with unsupportive family or friends.
Okay, what did he do?
Well, the text notes that Gary's response wasn't malicious. He didn't launch a campaign of vengeance against his dad.
He didn't try to constantly argue and convert him either, right?
Exactly. He simply marginalized the influence.
Mm.
He removed the friction.
Oh, so?
He sent his mom money when she needed it, fulfilling his filial duty, but he physically moved his life away to California.
So he put distance between his ambition and the source of the doubt.
Yes, he protected his perimeter.
I want to pause on this for a second because I can hear people listening to this and feeling a lot of friction right now.
Oh, for sure. It's a controversial move.
Right, because societally, we are blasted with messages about loyalty.
Blood is thicker than water and all that.
Exactly. You have to stick by your family no matter what.
Isn't it incredibly cold to just pack up and marginalize people you've known your whole life?
It feels cold only if you misunderstand the nature of a support system.
Okay, explain that.
In the source material, Bond introduces a metaphor to explain his father's mindset that perfectly addresses this exact guilt.
Oh, the garden metaphor.
Right. He says, a support system is like a garden. You always need to be on the lookout for weeds to pull.
A garden. So we are talking about cultivation versus, passive acceptance.
Exactly. Let's really stretch that garden metaphor out because it explains the mechanics of toxic relationships beautifully.
Let's do it.
If you are trying to grow a crop of prize-winning tomatoes, you spend time preparing the soil, watering them, making sure they get sunlight.
Right, lots of care and attention.
Now, a dandelion pops up next to your tomato plant. Is the dandelion evil?
No, it's just a weed. It's just doing what weeds do.
Right. It has no malicious intent. It's not actively plotting the downfall of your tomato.
But let's look at the mechanism of how a dandelion survives. It has a massive, deep taproot. It spreads out rapidly beneath the soil.
And what is it doing down there?
It is quietly, persistently stealing the water, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the sunlight that your tomato plant desperately needs to bear fruit.
Oh, wow.
So if you leave the dandelion there out of some misplaced sense of loyalty to all plants, your tomato will stunt, wither, and fail to produce.
So the father in this scenario isn't some evil villain plotting against Gary?
No, not at all. He's just a dandelion.
A psychological dandelion?
Exactly. His negativity, his constant warnings about how risky everything is, his demand for proof that is an emotional taproot.
It drains the mental bandwidth.
It drains everything. The confidence, the sheer energetic nutrients that an entrepreneur needs to survive the brutal startup phase of a business.
Right, because when you are an entrepreneur, your mental energy is your most precious resource.
It is your only resource, really, in the beginning. If you spend 40% of it just defending your right to exist to your own inner circle, you only have 60% left to fight the actual market.
And the market will absolutely crush you if you only wrong 60%.
It will eat you alive.
Think about the conversations you have with your own inner circle, when you float a new idea.
Right. Maybe you want to launch a side hustle.
Or raise your consulting rates, or quit your job to start an agency. What is the immediate response you get?
Do they say, wow, that sounds challenging, but how can we make it work?
Or do they immediately hit you with a wall of anxiety? Like, what if you fail? What about your health insurance?
Nobody pays that much for consulting. You should just be grateful for the job you have.
Yeah, exactly. Those kinds of comments.
Those comments, even when delivered with love and genuine concern, are lethal.
They are the water being drained from your soil.
Yep. The text is urging you to aggressively audit your circle. You have to take a hard, unsentimental look at the people you spend the most time with.
Are they watering your garden, or are they choking your roots?
And if they are choking your roots, you have to create distance.
Not out of anger, though.
No, not out of anger, out of necessity. It is a profound act of self-preservation.
So never keep people in your inner circle out of a misplaced sense of duty or historical guilt if they are actively dragging you down.
Exactly. You must actively construct an environment of people who want to see you achieve grand goals. The people around you should be a tailwind, not a headwind.
But getting that internal environment right, pulling the weeds, securing your perimeter, that's really just preparing you for the outside world, right?
Okay, step one, yes.
Because once your internal support system is locked in, you have to look at how you are moving through the actual marketplace.
And that brings us to the core behavioral philosophy Gary lays out in Chapter 4.
Right, which is defensive behavior invites aggressive action.
This is arguably one of the most important psychological frameworks in the entire book.
It's huge. Gary is sitting in this prison yard, observing the inmates.
And remember, a prison yard is just a microcosm of human nature, with all the polite societal rules stripped away.
Right, it reveals the primal software running underneath all our interactions.
Exactly. And he realizes a fundamental truth about how predators operate.
And we really need to define predators here. We aren't just talking about guys with shivs in a prison yard.
No, we are talking about predators in the corporate boardroom, predators in client negotiations, predatory vendors.
They exist in literally every ecosystem.
They absolutely do. And the key to dealing with them is understanding their operational psychology.
Okay, let's break that down.
Let's look at the evolutionary biology of a predator for a second. Whether it's a lion on the savannah or a cutthroat corporate negotiator, predators are, by definition, highly practical, energy-conserving creatures.
Right, they aren't looking to burn calories unnecessarily.
Exactly. They do not wake up looking for a grueling life-or-death struggle. A lion doesn't want to fight a healthy, aggressive buffalo that might break its jaw.
It wants the limping, isolated gazelle.
Why? Because the return on investment is high and the risk of injury is low. Predators want easy prey. They want an asymmetrical advantage.
Gary illustrates this dynamic with this brilliant, but honestly chilling story about a fellow inmate.
Yeah, this guy.
This particular guy is serving a relatively short, minor sentence, just 100 days.
And he is doing his time in what Gary describes as a soft prison camp.
Right, Boron wasn't a maximum security penitentiary. It was a minimum security camp for white-collar criminals and, minor offenders.
But the way this 100-day inmate behaves is incredibly telling.
Gary watches this man physically move through the camp.
He describes him as shuffling around, acting overly subservient, visibly terrified.
Yeah, and just desperately eager to please everyone he interacts with.
He is constantly deferring, constantly apologizing for his own existence.
And Gary points out that he himself is a profoundly nonviolent person. He has zero desire to hurt anyone.
Yet he admits that watching this guy irritated him on a visceral level.
Why is that?
Because the man is constantly broadcasting a very specific frequency to the entire yard.
The signal.
Right. He is radiating a signal that says, I'm scared, I'm easy, I'm vulnerable, I will not fight back.
He is the limping gazelle.
Exactly. And human beings, on a subconscious level, pick up on those micro-expressions of weakness.
Like what specifically?
The lowered gaze, the nervous laugh, the shrinking physical posture, the overly fast speech. It triggers a primal response.
Now, Gary notes that because Boron is a soft camp, the other inmates mostly just find the guy annoying and cut him some slack.
Right, they roll their eyes and ignore him.
But Gary makes a razor-sharp observation here.
He says that if this man were to take that exact same shuffling, subservient, please don't hurt me behavior into a real hard-nosed prison like San Quentin,
it would be a death sentence.
it would instantly attract the most vicious predators in the yard. It would literally be blood in the water.
Now, let's pull this out of the prison yard and put it right onto the desk of someone listening to this.
Yes, let's translate this.
Think about the freelance designer, or the new agency owner, or the startup founder pitching a venture capitalist.
The parallels are staggering.
How many entrepreneurs step into a negotiation and act exactly like that shuffling inmate?
It happens every single day in business. Let's construct a scenario.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine a freelance copywriter. Let's call him David. David gets on a Zoom call with a potentially lucrative client.
Okay, David's on the call.
The client is a bit aggressive, maybe a bit demanding right off the bat. Before they even discuss the scope of work, David starts laughing nervously.
Oh, no.
When the client asks about rates, David's voice goes up an octave. He says, well, my normal rate is $5,000, but, I really want to work with you, so I could probably do it for $3,500.
Wow.
Or honestly, whatever your budget is, we can figure it out.
You can practically hear the blood hitting the water.
Exactly. What did David just do?
He just sent the exact same signal as the shuffling inmate.
He broadcasted, I am scared to lose this deal. I am easy to manipulate. I am vulnerable to your pricing demands.
He thinks he is being accommodating.
He thinks he is building rapport by being flexible and nice.
But what is the client, the predator, actually hearing?
The predator hears, this person has no underlying value, no structural integrity, and I can extract maximum labor from them for minimum capital.
Wow.
Here is the brutal reality that the marketplace does not want to admit. The market has absolutely zero sympathy for a weakling.
Zero.
When you act desperate in business, it does not earn you a pat on the back. It does not make the client say, oh, he's trying so hard, let's give him a bonus.
Right. It earns you pure, unadulterated exploitation.
It's the client who emails you at 11:00 p.m. on a Friday, demanding revisions by Saturday morning.
Why do they do that? They don't do it to the agency that charges $50,000 and has strict communication boundaries.
No, they do it to the freelancer who apologized for their pricing on day one. Defensive posturing literally invites aggressive action.
And it goes beyond just pricing, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's in the emails you send. Just following up on this, or sorry to bother you again.
I was just wondering if you had a chance to look at the proposal.
You are shuffling. You are acting like a guest in your own business.
And when bad clients see this, they will demand more work outside the scope.
They will intentionally pay your invoices late because they know you won't enforce late fees.
And they will treat you poorly simply because you have signaled from the jump that you will accept it.
Right. Okay, I have to jump in here with a real-world dilemma, though.
Sure. What is it?
If I'm David the freelancer and I am struggling to pay my rent this month, I am desperate.
Right.
If I tell that aggressive client, like, my rate is $5,000, take it or leave it, and they walk away, I'm out on the street.
Yeah, that's a very real fear.
So how is losing the income and getting evicted a winning survival tactic? Are there times where you just have to eat dirt to survive?
That is a phenomenal question, and it cuts to the heart of why this is so difficult to execute.
Right.
The reason David can't pay his rent is because his entire pipeline relies on appeasing bargain hunters.
Okay.
Yes, in the micro moment, holding your ground might cost you that specific predatory client. But let's look at the macro.
Okay, let's look at it.
When you eat dirt to get a cheap client, that client becomes a massive time sink. They demand endless revisions. They drain your mental energy. They are a dandelion.
Ah, circling back to the garden.
Exactly. Because you are so busy servicing this horrible, low-paying client, you don't have the bandwidth to go find the $5,000 client who actually respects your boundaries.
So projecting weakness actually locks you into a cycle of poverty.
Precisely. And the text makes a very specific point here. You cannot just fake this.
You can't just pretend to be tough.
No, you can't put on a tough mask while your hands are shaking under the desk. You have to actually be tough.
You have to build the internal capacity to walk away from a bad deal.
You carry yourself with confidence, you hold firm to your boundaries, and you never project desperation.
Because defensive posturing, apologizing for your existence, trying to preemptively please everyone at your own expense, is the exact trigger mechanism that activates predatory behavior in others.
But let me push back on the alternative for a second.
Sure.
If defensive behavior is bad, and if I shouldn't be vulnerable, does that mean I have to swing the pendulum completely in the opposite direction?
What do you mean?
Do I have to become this hyper-aggressive, arrogant, macho bully? Am I supposed to get on client calls and start barking orders and starting fights just to prove I'm not a weakling?
Not at all. And this is where Gary's philosophy reaches a level of real sophistication.
Okay, good.
He clarifies immediately in the letter that his goal is absolutely not for his son to become a fighter or a bully or a thug.
The objective is to become what he calls a fight avoider.
A fight avoider. That is such a specific, intentional phrase.
It is the ultimate goal of all martial arts, really, and all advanced business strategy.
A fight avoider is a master of structural deterrence.
Right. It is someone who can sidestep conflict without losing an ounce of their dignity.
You achieve this not by throwing the first punch, but by visually, structurally, and energetically deterring attacks before the predator ever even formulates the thought of attacking you.
You make the perceived cost of attacking you appear so astronomically high that the predator simply calculates the math and moves on to easier prey.
And Gary gives a highly specific, very physical piece of advice to his son on how to achieve this deterrence in the real world.
He tells Bond to build lean, hard, strong, muscular arms.
The big arms principle.
It's so visceral. He specifically clarifies that he doesn't mean building a grotesque, bulging, steroid-injected bodybuilder physique.
Right, he just means cultivating enough visible, functional, undeniable strength to make a potential aggressor pause, look at you, and think to themselves, damn, how'd you like to meet him in a dark alley?
He is talking about changing your visual footprint in the world.
Predators scan the environment for visual cues of weakness. Gary is saying, give them a visual cue of consequence.
And Bond's commentary backs up how effective this is with a great real-world anecdote.
Yeah, Bond mentions a friend of his, a guy who was notoriously tough, a guy who had recently been in a physical altercation and won.
And this tough guy openly admitted to Bond that he would never, ever mess with Gary.
And what was the reason? Was Gary some trained assassin?
No. The only reason this tough guy gave was the look of Gary's arms.
Gary wasn't a giant. He wasn't necessarily a trained fighter.
But he had cultivated the structural appearance of someone who would exact a heavy toll on anyone who tried him.
He was no longer an easy target.
It makes complete sense when you look at macro geopolitics, too.
How so?
It is the exact same logic as a country building a massive, highly advanced military apparatus. They don't spend hundreds of billions of dollars on nuclear submarines and defense systems because they want to start a war.
Right. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
They build the weapons so they never have to use it. They do it to ensure that absolutely nobody else on the global stage ever entertains the thought of invading them.
Peace through strength.
That is the exact mechanism. Now, how do we translate the big arms principle from the physical body into the realm of business and entrepreneurship?
Because you can have 20-inch biceps, but if your business posture is weak, the market will still eat you alive.
Exactly. You have to build big arms into the structural framework of your business.
What does that look like practically? What are the big arms of an agency or a consulting firm?
It manifests in several structural ways. First, it means having ironclad, unapologetic contracts.
Let's break that down. What makes a contract unapologetic?
Well, a weak contract says invoices are due in 30 days. Please let us know if that's an issue.
Right.
An unapologetic contract says invoices are due upon receipt. Work ceases automatically on day 14 of non-payment. A 5% late fee accrues weekly thereafter.
Wow. The weak contract invites negotiation.
The strong contract establishes a boundary that looks like a brick wall. When a predatory client reads that strong contract, they realize, this person has systems, they have lawyers, they will not be easy to exploit.
They either sign it and behave, or they walk away, saving you the headache.
So the contract is the visual deterrent. What else?
Your brand presence and your pricing.
Yeah, branding is huge.
If you look like an amateur, you attract clients who want to pay amateur rates.
But if you have a premium, flawless brand presence that commands respect, you deter the bottom feeders.
And pricing is perhaps the biggest flex of business muscle there is.
Bond gives a perfect, legendary example of this from Gary's own career.
Oh, this is a great story.
Gary Halbert was already one of the highest paid copywriters in the world. But one day, he found out that a competitor in his space was charging more money for an ad than he was.
Now, how did Gary react?
He didn't shuffle around. He didn't complain that it was unfair.
He didn't try to undercut the competitor to steal market share either?
No, undercutting is defensive behavior. It's a race to the bottom.
Exactly. What Gary did was instantly, on the spot, raise his own prices to exceed the competitors.
He demanded to remain the premium option in the marketplace.
That is flexing your business muscle.
That is showing the market and your competitors that you are the prize, that you are not to be underestimated, and that your value is absolute.
And what is truly fascinating about this entire concept is that all of this armoring, the physical armoring of building big arms, the structural armoring of tight contracts and premium pricing, the emotional armoring of pulling the weeds from your garden, it all relies on one fundamental, indispensable internal trait.
A trait that sits at the absolute molten core of the entrepreneurial spirit.
Which brings us to the final and arguably most important key idea of this deep dive.
The ultimate satisfaction of absolute self-reliance.
This is the bedrock mindset that underpins every single word Gary writes in these letters.
You cannot implement the big arms principle, you cannot enforce strong contracts, and you cannot walk away from toxic family members unless you have cultivated absolute, unapologetic self-reliance.
The harsh, undeniable truth of the universe is that you cannot rely on a system, you cannot rely on a boss, you cannot rely on the government, and you certainly cannot rely on the universe to take pity on you.
The text illustrates this concept with two incredibly stark, almost jarringly opposite examples that somehow arrive at the exact same conclusion.
First, Gary is sitting in his cell, reading a copy of the National Enquirer, of all things.
Yeah, and he comes across a quote from the legendary industrialist John D. Rockefeller.
The quote is elegant and simple. Nothing is as satisfying as self-reliance.
A profound statement from one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in human history, a man who sat at the absolute apex of the capitalist system.
Right, and then literally on the same page, Gary pivots from Rockefeller to a brutal, raw story about a fellow inmate.
This is a 55-year-old heroin dealer, a career criminal who used to do time in San Quentin.
A man who represents the polar opposite of John D. Rockefeller in almost every conceivable societal metric.
He is at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy, cast out by the system.
Exactly. And Gary tells this intense story about him to illustrate self-reliance in its most raw form.
Apparently, a snitch had informed on this man's wife, causing her to lose her freedom and go to jail.
Sometime later, this heroin dealer spots the snitch in another institution, standing in a chain line.
Now, analyze what happens next. The man doesn't file a grievance with the warden.
He doesn't wait for the guards to handle it.
He doesn't sit back and hope the universe delivers karma to the snitch.
He outsources absolutely nothing.
He grabs a nearby pencil or pen, calmly walks up to the chain line, and tries to drive it straight through the snitch's eye into his brain.
He didn't manage to kill him, but he blinded him.
Now, we need to pause and be extremely clear here.
Yes, very clear. Gary Halbert is not endorsing prison violence.
The text is not telling you to physically attack people who wrong you, and neither are we. That is not the point of the story.
What Gary is doing is highlighting the extreme underlying reality of the mindset.
As Gary writes, observing the man's actions, it was just his way.
That man relied entirely, 100%, on his own two hands to exact his version of justice. He did not wait for a savior.
So how do we extract a practical, nonviolent business takeaway from a story about a guy blinding a snitch with a pencil?
We extract the underlying mechanism of extreme ownership.
As Bond notes in the commentary, self-reliance is often the true motive of great entrepreneurs, even more so than the pursuit of money itself.
The money is just a byproduct. The real goal is autonomy. The takeaway is that you have to stop waiting.
Stop waiting for what?
Everything. Stop waiting for permission from the gatekeepers of your industry.
Stop waiting for the perfect venture capital funding to magically appear in your bank account before you build the prototype.
Stop waiting for external validation from your parents or your peers that your idea is good enough.
Stop waiting for a white knight to save your failing agency. You have to be the architect of your own rescue.
You have to build your own safety net from scratch.
Okay, I have to stop the train here because I am sensing a massive contradiction in the philosophy we've laid out today.
Let's go back to the beginning of this deep dive.
We spent a significant amount of time talking about the birthday cake.
We talked about how vital a support system is, how important Doc the friend was, how you need to surround yourself with people who water your garden.
Now, in the very same breath, we are saying you must be absolutely self-reliant, outsource nothing, and rely only on yourself.
How on earth do we reconcile those two seemingly opposite ideas?
That is the ultimate tension in the text, and it is a brilliant paradox.
But it resolves perfectly if you look at it through the lens of a mathematical equation.
Think of your support system, your family, your mentors, your friends, your team as a multiplier.
Multiplier. Okay, track with me here.
A great team, loyal friends, a loving family, they can multiply your efforts exponentially.
Good mentor can be a 10x multiplier on your career.
Right.
A great business partner can be a 5x multiplier on your output.
But your own self-reliance, your internal drive, your resilience, your ability to stand alone in the dark and keep working, that is the base number in the equation.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
If your base number is 0, if you have 0 self-reliance, 0 internal discipline, 0 ability to handle adversity on your own 2 feet, then it absolutely does not matter what you multiply it by.
A million times 0 is still 0.
You can have the most supportive parents in the world. You can have a billion-dollar venture capital firm backing you. You can have the smartest mentors.
But if your internal baseline of self-reliance is 0, no support system in the universe can multiply that into success.
You must supply the primary force. The cake is nice, but Gary Halbert is the one who has to survive the cell.
That perfectly ties every single thread of this chapter together. The support system is a luxury that accelerates you, but self-reliance is the oxygen that keeps you alive.
Exactly. So as we synthesize the soul of Chapter 4,
What is the ultimate takeaway?
the ultimate lesson here is that mental armor, physical armor, and business armor are all manifestations of the exact same underlying principle.
Cultivating genuine structural strength is never about looking for a fight, and it's certainly never about acting arrogant or bullying those beneath you.
It is about making yourself so undeniably self-reliant, so structurally formidable, and so grounded in your own value that you naturally repel predators and effortlessly attract genuine allies.
You ruthlessly, unsentimentally strip away the dandelions in your garden to protect your energy.
You intentionally build your big arms, your contracts, your brand, your physical presence to visually deter conflict.
And you navigate the world, whether it is the concrete of a prison yard or the glass walls of a boardroom, entirely unapologetically on your own terms.
It is an incredibly empowering perspective when you strip away the societal guilt and look at the raw mechanics of it.
It really is.
Next time on the deep dive, we are going to shift gears in a major way.
We'll be moving from the psychology of surviving the harsh realities of the prison yard to the strategy of absolutely thriving in the open market.
As Gary reveals, the absolute best group of people you could ever hope to sell a product to, it is a masterclass in market selection that you will not want to miss.
The foundation of strength is laid. Next, we build the empire.
But before we go, we want to leave you with a final thought to really mull over.
Think back to that opening idea of painting a bullseye on your back by playing it safe, by shuffling around and apologizing for your rates.
Ask yourself this. If a stranger or worse, a ruthless competitor or a predatory client looked at your business posture today, what would they see?
Would they see an easy target shuffling around, desperately eager to please?
Or would they see an impenetrable fortress?